Chapter 1575. This team came from Olympus. They had a growth system that was highly evaluated by the Black Tower because of the particularity of Mount Olympus itself. As long as a newborn was born on this mountain, it would have a certain degree of divinity. Every year, professional priests would go to the cities and villages at the foot of the mountain and conduct an indiscriminate divinity appraisal on every newborn. The appraisal mainly included the following two aspects. 1. Divinity attribution, judging by the imprints, tissue characteristics, or some natural defects on the newborn. Once the newborn's divinity was identified as belonging to a god on Mount Olympus, its future growth path would also be determined. Because the best growth path was determined at birth, coupled with the similarity of divinity characteristics, their growth rate was among the best in thousands of worlds, and while ensuring the speed, the quality was also very high. 2. Divinity concentration. Different newborns showed more or less divinity characteristics. Some newborns only had a very small or even incomplete birthmark, and their divinity concentration was low. Some newborns had lines all over their body, and they could even understand and read hieroglyphs at birth, or master certain elemental energy, or have infinite strength, etc. Newborns with a divinity concentration of more than 80% would be directly sent to the corresponding god's palace by the priests, and they would receive the best cultivation and training from an early age. Of course, they had a chance to go down the mountain and reunite with their families once a year. Currently, the 5 young people who participated in the Day of the Ladybug all had a divinity concentration of 100% at birth, and they had unparalleled talent. In the real world, they had been chosen as the successors of the gods. Because of this special growth system, they had a unique world ability, God's Descent. It could be activated under any circumstances, and the individual would gain the power of the corresponding god. The higher the individual's level, the higher the divinity concentration, and the stronger the effect of God's Descent. And the 5 of them could exert the best effect. The divinity of each member of the team was as follows: Captain Demis, Mistress of the Beasts and Mistress of the Wilderness; Artemis Bow, God of Light and Prophecy; Apolloniorn, Bull of Minos, Minotaur in the Labyrinth; Minotaur Feynman; Rhadamanthys, the Underworld Magistrate Decius; God of War Ares. In the previous Olympian Holy Selection, they had all won the top 10 places. Under Demis' suggestion, each of them took out a fragment of a treasure map to form a treasure map of destiny. Together, they embarked on a journey of destiny to search for treasures. Originally, he thought that such a combination would be unbeatable. Unexpectedly, even though they had the geographical advantage and had the same number of people, before the battle had even begun, Glass's eyes had a huge problem. Demis held her brother in her arms. He took out drops of the extremely rare forest essence liquid that was unique to Demis and dripped them into his eyes to provide as much healing as possible. However, this only stopped the pain and neutralized the remaining matter inside. When Bo opened his eyes again, there was only a weak glow. His eyes were gray and lifeless. The siblings' hearts were connected, and Demis seemed to be able to feel this pain as well. She was upset and angry. Norn, have they been separated? We should have split their team into 3 groups, but one of them destroyed the wall on the spot and joined up with the other 2. We simply split them into 2 groups and 3 groups. The young man with holes all over his body should be the most dangerous one among them. However, there should only be one person in their team who can locate the maze. As long as they are separated, it will greatly slow down their exploration. Not only do we have to slow them down, we have to make them pay the price. Next, we will accompany them through the maze. Once there is a chance, we will dodge their hands and feet and kill them all in the maze one by one. After Bo heard his sister's battle plan, he quickly stopped her. Sister, no, I know where they came from. Is it not Dawn of Terror? No, the scene I saw just now, the blasphemous scene that filled my entire brain, it is definitely not the scene of Dawn of Terror. Not only did it destroy my eyes, but it can also corrode and pollute my brain and consciousness through my nerves. Even your forest essence liquid can neutralize it. There's only one thing I can think of. Rumor has it that S01, which has long been cut off from the Black Tower, is the first world ruled by the hybrid demons. The thing that wriggles under their skin is the characteristic symbol of the hybrid demons, tentacles. No wonder even my eyes can't see through it. Feynman, who looked like an old man with a withered body, suddenly interrupted. Cough, cough. No wonder. No wonder I smelled the familiar scent of death. If it is from S01, then it makes sense. After all, Mr. Alex, who is about to inherit the god of death, also came from S01. The young man who spoke to you, Demis, exuded the scent of death. Although it is different, it is similar. Hearing this, Demis slowly suppressed her anger. She was puzzled. Didn't you say that the connection between S01 and the Black Tower is only being restored and that only humans are allowed to pass through? Why would there be hybrid demons here? Feynman, who was floating in the air, answered, I don't know either. Mr. Alex hasn't returned for a long time. Perhaps the connection between the worlds is slowly being restored. Or maybe it is because the treasure map of destiny has increased the difficulty. The Black Tower deliberately let the hybrid demons enter this game as our main competitors. This is the true difficulty of the treasure map. That's possible. At this time, Bo, whose eyes were damaged, gave an important message. Although I saw something I shouldn't have, but in that chaotic void, I also saw some truths. My brain still clearly stores the images of the hybrid demons. Give me some time, and I might be able to analyze their characteristics and weaknesses. Since they're separated by the maze, their exploration speed will be greatly reduced. Why don't we use this opportunity to go to the center of the maze and reach the treasure location earlier? If we can get the treasure earlier, we can avoid the battle with the hybrid demons. From Bo's words, it was clear that he was afraid of the hybrid demons in S01. Then let's do this. Demis waved her hand, and a muscular stag appeared out of thin air. She not only had archery skills, but she could also summon wild beasts to help her in battle. The stag carried the weakened bow and followed the team into the maze at full speed. Maze separation, it seemed like they were only separated by a wall, but in reality, they needed to take a long detour to meet up. Moreover, the wall could isolate all sound. It was impossible to shout through the wall to confirm each other's position. However, the moment the maze changed, Grimm used the same method to forcibly tear open the wall and stay together with Han Dong and Hopper. As for Sally and Kit, they were separated by two walls and space had changed. It was impossible to know where they were in the maze. Chapter 1576. Minotaur, the Minotaur in a Labyrinth? Whether it's their mastery of the labyrinth or their own image, it fits perfectly. Coupled with their ancient Greek attire, I'm almost 100% sure. These guys come from the world with Greek mythology as their background, and they are directly related to the gods and the myths. Han Dong had taught in Italy before his death, so he was very familiar with Greek mythology. In addition, Han Dong had also seen the brief battle between Hopper and the young man with the horns clearly. At first, Hopper had suppressed him in terms of strength, but as the divine seal appeared on the horns, the golden combat aura that wrapped around his body quickly condensed into a virtual image of a minotaur and was sucked into the young man's body. In an instant, the young man's skin, muscles, and even appearance were changing. He became able to confront Hopper head-on. This scene reminded Han Dong of an ability he used to turn the tables in desperate situations, God Borrowing. However, it was fundamentally different. Han Dong's God Borrowing would bring about a comprehensive substitute, including a level. It might even change one's own attributes and personality, as well as an additional abnormal ability from the old king. Of course, the price was also extremely high. The opponent's move, called God's Descent, did not increase one's level, but greatly increased one's attributes and divinity. Compared to Han Dong's God Borrowing, it was more stable and less burdensome to the body. These guys must have chosen their corresponding gods early on, or they were born with one of the characteristics of Olympus. As long as they choose a god, they only need to cultivate and grow along the path. Hopper, how did it feel just now? Hopper looked at his palm with a straight face and recalled the feeling when he clenched the horns. Well, it's not just the strength that suddenly changed, but also a kind of pressure on the consciousness level. Are you confident the next time we meet? Hopper scratched his head. It's a little troublesome, but it shouldn't be a problem. That's good. While the two chatted, Grim was resting with his eyes closed. All the small holes all over his body were closed. He just stood and rested. Tearing open the walls of the labyrinth twice in a row put a lot of burden on his body. Seeing this, Han Dong and Hopper whispered to each other while waiting for Grim to regain his composure. Hopper turned his head to look at both sides of the maze. It seems impossible to meet up with Kit and the rest now. We can only rely on ourselves to explore the maze, right? Yes. With Sally around, there was no need to worry about them. By virtue of Kit's pathfinding ability, he was bound to reach the center of the maze. We just need to find a way to get through the maze and meet up with them in the central area. Wait, there seems to be some movement. Han Dong did not let down his guard for even a moment. The other party could control the labyrinth, so it was entirely possible for them to lay an ambush and launch a sneak attack. However, as the commotion grew louder and louder, it wasn't the Greek team that attacked them. It was the giants that had rushed over after hearing the commotion. Furthermore, there was more than one of them. They seemed to be a group of giants that lived in the maze. There are a lot of them. It's coming. His demonic eyes were fully opened. Staring at the corner of the labyrinth, Han Dong was shocked by the scene that appeared in front of him. It wasn't just a few giants walking out side by side. There were so many of them that they were squeezing out like a tide. Hundreds of demi-humans were stacked together and trampled on each other. Their bodies were completely squeezed together. Many of the giants didn't even have a foothold and were completely pushed forward by other giants. There was even a serious stampede, and several giants' heads were directly crushed. However, as long as their hearts weren't injured, they could still continue forward. This number, something's not right. Count. Come out and smell it. Han Dong didn't retreat immediately. Instead, he let out Count, who hadn't fully recovered yet. Nicholas, there's a different smell behind the group of giants. It seems that someone is controlling this group of low-level demi-humans. Sure enough, I was wondering why so many demi-humans would suddenly rush out. In that case, it's necessary to see who's controlling this group of giants. Maybe we can get important information about the maze. Hopper, let's retreat while killing this group of giants. Lock onto their hearts and try to increase the efficiency of killing as much as possible. Okay, due to the sheer number of giants, Han Dong planned to use guerrilla tactics. At this time, Grim, who had just recovered from his rest, stretched his body and slowly walked forward. The small holes all over his body slowly opened up. It's just a group of low-level giants. Let's just block them here and kill them all. If we keep retreating, coupled with the changes in the maze itself, we can completely return to our original position. I don't want to waste too much time in the maze. After that, the shirtless Grim stood in the middle of the passage with his arms spread out. He looked like a man guarding the pass alone. Hopper was attracted by the scene and stood behind Grim like a bodyguard. Sighed. Han Dong sighed and ordered Count, who hadn't fully recovered yet. Help me keep an eye on the situation. The Greek team is probably still here. If you smell their scent, inform me immediately. It'll be really troublesome if we're attacked from the front and back. Woof. Grim was a little unhappy. He thought that the delicacy in his mouth had suddenly slipped away. He could only vent his dissatisfaction by attacking the giants in front of him. It was also a good opportunity for him to familiarize himself with the devouring bloodline from the Great Serpent. Domain expansion. The demi-humans piled up like a mountain and rolled in all kinds of exaggerated forms. They were about to reach Grim. An invisible domain spread out. The horrifying abyssal life form appeared behind Grim again. Grim's face, with a big hole dug out, locked onto the hearts of all the demi-humans. Buzz. Dozens of demi-humans, eyes dimmed at the same time. Like mindless rotten meat, they all fell in front of Grim, twitching slightly and dying quickly. Their chests were dug out with a hole, and their hearts were completely devoured. However, dozens of demi-humans did not affect the overall situation much. There were already demi-humans following behind, stepping on the corpses of their companions. They were getting closer, and Grimm seemed to need a certain cool-down time to use the technique just now. Even so, he still had no intention of backing down. An ugly demi-human that was charging at the forefront was less than 5 meters away from Grimm with its mouth wide open. Hopper's strong body of more than 2.5 meters came forward. Taking advantage of the gap, just now, he had removed all the armor on his upper body, revealing a flawless, muscular body. Domain expansion. The effect of the super muscles even interfered with reality. A gravitational field was released, and the giant in the air was affected by the gravity and fell heavily in front of Hopper, becoming a living target. His right arm gathered strength. Strong muscle tentacles grew on the surface of each muscle cell, entangling with each other, increasing the efficiency of the force transmission by several times, or even dozens of times. He did not punch out. Hopper moved his center of gravity to the limit in a bow posture, which was equivalent to pulling his body into a bow. One of his palms pressed against the giant's head. Force, like an arrow shot out from a bow full of strings. The muscles of his body were perfectly connected, and when he retracted his bow, his arm pushed forward. Buzz. A wave of air spread out in the air. The extremely exaggerated force stuffed the giant's head directly into his body, almost squeezing it out of his lower body. The giant's body was like a huge meatball, flying backward rapidly. There was a feeling of playing bowling. Boom! Accompanied by a loud bang, the meatball exploded into the group of giants that came after. All kinds of flesh splashed wantonly, and the rhythm was completely disrupted. Grimm saw this and could not stop laughing. He slapped Hopper's back muscles hard with one hand. Smack! Oh my God, Hopper, your strength is too exaggerated. Come with me. Kill them all. Chapter 1577. Count focused on sensing the situation of the Greek team. Han Dong also joined in the hunting of the giants. Although he was reluctant at first, Han Dong still enjoyed it when he was fully immersed in it. Although the demi-humans were relatively stupid and did not know how to change the position of their hearts, they were still very aggressive. He used his left arm to sweep the chainsaw to clean up a large area. Then he used his right arm to lock on a single target. He wielded the holy sword in his palm and quickly and accurately pierced through the heart. The three of them had worked together to fight against the Golden Angels in the first London game. Their current cooperation was even more seamless. During the fight against the giant tide, Han Dong also noticed that Grimm was adapting to the bloodline of Apophis Orochi blood at a speed visible to the naked eye. The efficiency of devouring was constantly improving, the cooldown time was constantly shortening, and the energy consumption was also decreasing. Even if the living labyrinth would automatically digest the bodies of the giants, because the killing speed was too fast, the corpses were almost piling up in the passage. Not long after, the giant tide, formed by the demi-humans, did not continue to surge forward and began to retreat. It was not because they were afraid of Han Dong's powerful strength, but because they had received some kind of order. Some kind of order from the soul was forcing them to leave. Boom! A strong tremor came, and even the labyrinth area was trembling. The target of this tremor was the mastermind behind the giant tide that Count had smelled before. Oh, there's a bigger one? Grimm, who was completely intoxicated, rushed forward immediately. There was no time to stop it. Just as Grimm reached the corner, a fat, stitched leg followed, and the toe alone was the same size as Grimm's body. 100 meters! Han Dong and Hope were about to go forward to help. Grimm, who was about to jump toward the giant, was frozen in the air. A magic wrapped around Grimm's body and threw him back at the speed of a bullet. It was not inferior to the giant that Hope used as a bowling ball. Hope saw this and immediately jumped up. He accurately intercepted Grimm in the air. Then, through muscle control, he made his chest soft and elastic so that Grimm could have enough cushioning. At the same time, 8 fat, sewn legs appeared one after another, carrying a body that looked like a mountain piled up with fat. Even the passage of the maze was widened because of his appearance. It was different from the 100-meter-long beasts they had hunted before. What appeared in front of him was a humanoid giant. Whether it was in terms of strength or physique, it was a level higher. Moreover, it was proficient in some kind of profound magic technique. Ha ha ha! Truly powerful. It's been a long time since I've seen intruders of your caliber. To think that you could kill so much fodder in one go. I, human emperor, Dimitru, happen to be in dire need of manpower. Are you willing to serve under me? There's an important match here, and I need your help. If you can obtain the final victory for me, you will also receive rewards far beyond your imagination. The sound of the layers of fat being squeezed out echoed in the tunnel. At the same time, a series of system notifications rang in his mind. Your performance has attracted the attention of an important figure in Limitless City, Celestial Race, Human Emperor Dimitru Shan. He hopes to establish a friendly relationship with you. You can increase your friendliness by working for him. When the friendliness reaches respected, hints related to the main storyline and clues related to the final treasure will be unlocked. The scene in front of him could be considered a blessing in disguise. The changes in the maze caused by the small team's conflict had unexpectedly attracted an important figure from the inner city. If it was Han Dong alone, he might have agreed. As long as he used this giant as a stepping stone, he could slowly find out the truth about Limitless City. Unfortunately, Han Dong was not the only one who made the decision. Moreover, this so-called human emperor giant had said something wrong. If he had used words like cooperation or equality, there might have been room for negotiation. Even in World S01, only the old king dared to say that he wanted to recruit Grimm as a subordinate or servant. When this fat and huge celestial race proposed to recruit Grimm, the three of them were whispering to each other as if they were discussing something. They neither accepted nor rejected. Instead, they slowly approached the giant, as if they wanted to give him an answer. The human emperor also thought that the price he offered was not low. Not only could he guarantee their safety, but he could also get rewards. The outsiders would definitely be willing to join him. After all, no one had ever rejected him before. What do you think? In view of your strong performance, as long as you agree to be my subordinate, you will receive the corresponding authority and resources. You will have the right to move freely in the inner city. At the same time, you will also receive some pure Hydra liquid. When a human emperor threw out the olive branch again, the three of them had already arrived at his feet. Han Dong had unknowingly drawn an exaggerated smiley face with blood along his mouth. The proposal sounds very attractive. We are also worried about the maze. Ha ha ha. I wonder if you can state the specific conditions in advance? Han Dong laughed as he spoke. Although his voice was not loud, the laughter contained within could be heard clearly. His laughter was more like a living creature that would actively crawl into the ears of others. What conditions do you want? Ha ha ha. It feels like we are asking for too much. As long as you are willing to work for me and meet my expectations, I will try my best to satisfy your conditions. Then I will say it. There is only one condition. We hope to get your heart. Ha ha ha. Is this condition okay? When the word heart was uttered, Han Dong could not hold back and began to laugh maniacally. The mad laughter seed that was buried in the human emperor's brain in advance had fully sprouted at this moment. The impact of the seed's consciousness caused the giant to be stunned. At the same time, Hopper was in a perfect throwing posture, and the object he was throwing was Grimm. Crack! At the moment of throwing, the ground sank due to the reaction force. Grimm was like a human rocket launcher, flying towards the chest of the 100-meter giant. By the time the fat emperor shook off the influence of the mad laughter seed, there was a hole in his chest, and a large amount of fat fluid was flowing out. Looking at the team that was missing one person below him, he suddenly understood something. Anger soared to the sky. The fat in his body began to move, and a large amount of fat accumulated white blisters appeared on the surface of his skin. Warning: your relationship with the celestial species, human emperor, Dimitru Thane has been completely broken, and your attitude has become hatred. As long as you are in the inner city maze area, you will be hunted down by the human emperor. Chapter 1578. The Greek team. Because Glass discovered the origin of Han Dong and the others S01, the team made a different choice and headed to the center of the labyrinth as fast as they could. With Inan's control of the labyrinth, the team avoided the giants and kept going deeper into the labyrinth. The whole process took less than an hour. Finally, following the last straight path, they completely left the labyrinth area and arrived at the center of the limitless city. There stood a mountain that was over 1,000 meters tall and reached the highest point of the game area. Or it could be said that this was the only giant that reached the 1,000-meter level in the limitless city and was also the first giant to be born. When the Aether liquid descended into the world, the first thing it touched was a rock. Feeling the arrival of outsiders, the rock layer loosened. Rumble, an eye that was over 10 meters in diameter, slowly opened in the rock layer. Because Demis didn't feel any hostility, she signaled everyone to relax. It has been a long time since an outsider was able to reach this depth without the help of the Aether liquid. Continue climbing, outsiders. The Aether liquid that you have been searching for is at the top of my body. Climb to the top and drink the liquid, then you can ascend. At the same time, the Greek team also received the final notification of the main storyline. Just like what the original giants said, as long as they reached the top, they could find the Aether liquid of origin in the limitless city and pass the game. But this wasn't what they wanted. Or it could be said that the teams that came from different worlds didn't want to pass the game. They who obtained and consumed the treasure map of destiny. They were the travelers of destiny that stood at the top of their level. They only had one goal, which was to obtain the ultimate treasure hidden in a corner of the destiny world. Just when Demis wanted to step forward and ask the mountain about the treasure, the blind Glass suddenly stepped forward and blocked in front of his sister. Sister, let me talk to it. Be careful. Glass wasn't afraid of the giant that was constantly releasing its divine aura. After jumping down from the deer's back, it slowly walked to the front of the mountain and placed its hand on the surface of the rock. God's descent. Waves of warm light seeped into the rock stratum, removing the impurities that had accumulated over hundreds of years for the entire mountain. It even caused the weeds in the crevices to quickly grow and give birth to colorful flowers. The originally existing forest glowed with a brilliant vitality that had never been seen before. This feeling of rebirth made Dashan feel extremely comfortable. Thank you, young man. Your body does not contain any Aether liquid. I can see the greed in the eyes of your friends. Only your blind eyes are so pure. Your purpose for coming here seems to be not only to ascend, but also to find some kind of extremely precious treasure, right? The giant's voice echoed in Bo's head. He had not even made his request. That's right. Big Sister and the others all yearn for more power. As for myself, if not for Teacher Apollo's request for training and my sister's need for my companionship and help, in fact, I prefer to travel to different worlds and learn about different cultures and arts. In exchange, I will also give them the art knowledge from Olympus. Child, you're different from the Outlanders I have met. I am very happy to meet a young man like you. Please come into my body through this cave alone. I want to talk to you in depth. Similarly, I will also tell you about the forbidden zone of the giants. The treasure that your friends are looking for is there. Outlanders like you, who have not absorbed any Aether liquid, can indeed go there. But before you go, I may be able to provide you with some personal help. When the conversation ended, a solo mission notification appeared in Bo's mind. The mountain in front of him gradually expanded. It revealed a dark and deep cave passage that led to the giant's body. Only Bo was allowed to go in alone. The rest of the team would be squeezed by the rock stratum as long as they got close to it. There would even be 10-meter-tall rock guards that would attack them. Well done. Go in. We will wait for you outside. Okay. Although Bo was blind, he could still identify the direction in the cave. He did not bring any torch or exploration tools and went in alone. At this moment, the camera slowly moved up to the top of the mountain. If Han Dong was here and looked up with the camera, he would definitely feel that this mountain was very familiar. The overall structure, especially the mountain structure above the mountainside. It was exactly the same as the Mount Yueshin that only he and the Tomb Lord had climbed into. Of course, due to the limitations of the game scene, the height could not be compared to Mount Yueshin. Similarly, a man sat on the top of the mountain, fishing at the edge of the sky. It was Mr. M's identity as the administrator of the Ladybug game. While fishing, he was carefully paying attention to the details of the inner-city labyrinth. Currently, the team with the fastest progress should be this group from S06, Olympus, a young man with a good understanding. He has abandoned worldly desires at a young age and focused on the pursuit of culture. He may become a saint in the future or even be chosen by one of his colleagues. Immediately after, Mr. M moved his gaze to the periphery of the labyrinth. Two teams with completely different styles and characteristics were arriving at the labyrinth area in different ways. One of them used the tree bridge created by Giant Tree Ryan to directly reach the middle belt of the labyrinth. The other took a boat along the only river in Limitless City and also reached the middle belt of the labyrinth. The other hybrid demon team, as well as the team from Ten Takamagura, have all entered the labyrinth through special methods. In this case, the progress should be just in time. I can finally do something more interesting. Finally, Mr. M's gaze moved to the depths of the labyrinth. Looking at the scene of the intense battle with the celestial race, his vision zoomed in again and locked onto one of the young men. Han Dong, you should have noticed that the real difficulty of this game is not the game itself. It is adaptation and competition. I hope you can let me see the true strength of the S01 young men. I hope your performance will make it easier for me to discuss the follow-up cooperation with those guys. Huff, huff, huff. Han Dong, covered in blood, was gasping for breath. The surface of his body was full of distortions and dents left by collisions, which were slowly recovering through his zombie physique. Because he had used the holy sword too much, his entire right arm was completely torn. Even so, Han Dong still dragged his broken body, stepped on a layer of fat, and headed to the top. The so-called Emperor had been defeated. Because it was too dangerous, Grim did not extract a complete heart, and could only crush it in the body. The fat body of the 100-meter level was like a pile of rotten meat on the ground. What Han Dong needed to do now was to, while the body was dead and the brain still had 5 minutes of activity, through the tentacles, he could seize the memory information, obtain the route of the labyrinth and the secrets hidden here. Whoosh! The tentacles plunged into. A large number of fragmented memories flashed quickly, until a key piece of information was obtained. The Giant's Forbidden Zone only allows individuals who are not affected by Iter to enter? Is it here? Chapter 1579. Pucci. At the opening of the giant's chest, dense, stinky white fat liquid gushed out like a fountain. Glenn, who had exhausted his strength, used this push from the body to slowly squeeze out from the chest. Finally, Glenn, who was wrapped in white liquid, was directly spat out of the body and fell to the ground from 100 meters high. Crack, he felt his hands and feet, and even his spine were broken. However, Glenn's face was full of excitement. He was very satisfied with this trip. Wow, the situation in this thing's body is several times worse than the previous goat. It's like a giant nest with self-consciousness and a complete system. It's quite exciting. This guy's body fat can be split into any kind of giant. At first, it's not so good. As the number of kills increases, the new giants will be more and more adapted to my attack methods, and their forms will be more and more targeted at me. The consciousness will also track my position, squeeze the body cavity, and discharge acidic substances. There were even some areas where there was a vacuum, which made my body feel very uncomfortable. There is no way to bring out the whole heart. I can only destroy it. Nicholas, how is it? Can you get the memory data? Han Dong, who was lying on the giant's head, made an okay gesture. When Han Dong finished extracting the memory, a prompt sounded frowny face. One of the inner city's 5 emperors, Dimitru Thane, has been killed. The body of the killer is stained with the blood of the heart, and will continue to emit the smell of the emperor, The giants wandering in the labyrinth area will take the initiative to avoid. Labyrinth map and related precious items have been dropped. Please pick them up. Because of the death of the area boss, a lot of precious materials and items were dropped, similar to the situation of killing the 100-meter beast before, scaled according to the proportion of the human body. Exclusive drop. Labyrinth map. Materials dropped. 1. Concentrated fat. The most precious and pure concentrated fat from the Emperor's body, stored in a glass bottle, purple quality. 2. Giant skin. Celestial. The highest grade of giant skin. Can be used to make armor, purple quality. 3. Superior meat. Large quantity. Taken from the essence of the 100-meter level humans. After processing, can be used to strengthen the body and provide continuous regeneration, blue quality. Items dropped. Frowny face. Emperor's cushion out. Movement speed increased by 120%. In a critical moment, it can generate a fat layer to offset the incoming attack damage. There's a mount? Isn't a little too weird? The fatty cushion with 4 fat legs was placed in front of him and even swayed slightly like a pet. Before Han Dong could check the status of his mount, Grim dragged the body that had just been reattached and sat on it directly. The soft and warm active fat immediately stuck to Grim's body and even filled up his pores. The open meat cushion could allow the entire body to lie on it. Because of the efficient buffering brought by the fat, there was basically no shock. Nicholas, you already have a bloodline mount, so this thing belongs to me. I just happen to need a good rest. This human body really can't take care of itself. You guys can distribute the other things. I'm going to sleep first. Ignoring the potential dangers in the labyrinth, Grim's strange snoring sounded again. Han Dong could only continue to pick up items and let Count keep watch. This bottle of fat might be very valuable, but I should have to go back to the Ladybug store to process it, right? Since the Greek team didn't continue to attack us, it meant that they were moving deeper into the maze. If we go back to the city now, it will take a long time because the cooldown of the coordinate stone hasn't ended. Sigh. I'll keep it with me first and find a chance to use it later. At this time, the exhausted Hope came forward and stared at the spoils on the ground, especially the big pile of superior meat, large amount, that was emitting a blue light. Can I have this meat? It was originally our shared spoils. Use it as you wish. You're welcome. Then I'll start eating. Due to the high intensity of the battle, Hope even used up his myogenic cells in the later stages of the battle to maintain a frontal confrontation with the giant to reduce the pressure on Grim's body. Currently, his body had significantly shrunk, and even some of his muscles were severely atrophied. Like a primitive man, he directly pounced on the raw meat and ate it in big bites. He even grew mouths between his muscles and gnawed on it together. Good meat. Hope was in the stage of physical growth, or rather, he had always been growing. After eating raw meat for a long time, he could taste the quality of the meat and its effects on the body with just one bite. The essence meat from the 100-meter giant in front of him could be said to be the real deal. Hope's body was recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, he seemed to be unsatisfied. Can I eat this stack of meat skin as well? Giant skin, celestial species. This was a rare purple material. As long as he could bring it back to the Ladybug shop and pay for the processing of the material, he could make protective gear of the same level. Although Han Dong was reluctant, considering that he did not have time to go back, he nodded. Hope made a giant meat roll on the spot and stuffed it evenly into his mouth. He was greatly satisfied. Hope's body is changing as he eats. The efficiency of food is so high. Eating meat could allow Hope to regenerate his muscles and recover to his original state. Then, eating a higher grade skin would allow Hope to change his skin. Layers of giant skin that were firmer and could carry more weight and resist attacks were forming on the surface of Hope's body. Seeing this, Han Dong was no longer stingy and directly handed over the glass bottle filled with fat concentrate. Hope, do you still want a drink? This is... Unexpectedly, Hope almost vomited after taking a sip. Ugh, I really can't drink this. It completely repels the compatibility of my muscles. Once it's in my stomach, my body may change, and my vitality may increase, but it will seriously affect my combat state. Skin and meat is still better. Okay, I'll think of a way to use this bottle of fat. When Hope's body was finished eating, it was equivalent to a qualitative change. After all, the essence of Day of the Ladybug was to transplant everyone's consciousness into another conventional body, and their various abilities were also limited. The reason why Bloodline was important was that the introduction of Bloodline could increase the upper limit of the body. The current qualitative change of Hope's body had achieved an effect similar to that of Bloodline. His strength and endurance were all improved. I really need to thank the Greek team. If they hadn't caused the maze turbulence, we wouldn't have met this guy. He had the map. Together with the memory that Han Dong read in the giant's brain, he immediately locked onto a dark area that even the map did not show in detail, the giant forbidden zone. Let's go take a look here. Chapter 1580. A four-legged, fleshy mount carried the sleeping Grim at the back of the team. Hopper and Han Dong, clad in heavy armor, were moving forward along the mysterious area indicated on the map. Nicholas, we're not going to the center of the maze, are we? No, but according to the map, this place is more difficult to reach than the center. There's only one way to get there, and the map shows that it's covered by shadows. Can Miss Sally and Kit find us? According to the memory I got from the giant's brain, the giant's forbidden zone will repel everything related to Eicher. That is to say, if we go against the flow of Eicher and find the location of the repel, we can find this place. If they don't find us in the center, they should think of this. In order not to waste time, we'll go there in advance. Compared to meeting up with our teammates, the most important thing is to not let the Greek team get there in advance. If it doesn't work, we can fight 3 against 5. What's hidden there? Will we be able to end our journey when we get there? Hopper didn't know about the treasure, or the other Mantis demons didn't know. Only Han Dong, the owner of the treasure map of destiny, knew how to use it. Everyone was just following along to experience the journey of destiny. Han Dong didn't deliberately hide it and answered directly. There's a treasure that's very important to me hidden there. Good. Since it's something important to you, Nicholas, I'll do my best to help. Hopper's birth was the closest thing to a human's origin, and he had received a lot of care from Han Dong in London. In Hopper's eyes, Han Dong stood at the same height as Grim and was the focus of many old kings. They moved forward according to the map. There were fewer and fewer forks in the maze. The walls of the passage slowly became lifeless, and the plants between the rock layers were withered. Slowly, there were even giant corpses embedded in the walls. As they went deeper, there were more and more giant corpses. These corpses began to replace the plants, cement, and steel, and gradually became the main component of the maze's walls. Even Grim slowly woke up when he smelled the giant's corpse. The mysterious area covered by shadows on the map was about to be revealed. At the current location where Han Dong and the others had arrived, the materials of the walls on both sides had all been transformed into giant corpses, with the majority of them being subhumans. The scene at the end of the tunnel was finally revealed. It was more shocking than any other scene in Limitless City. The first thing that caught his eye was a rotten corpse's skull with a diameter of 100 meters. Half of it was white bones and half of it was rotten flesh. His tongue, which was the most complete part of his body, was exposed along with his completely open mouth. Like a red carpet that was 100 meters long, it led the visitors into his mouth. Such a huge head naturally corresponded to a body that was over 1,000 meters long. It was bulging high. The rotten flesh also contained scales, hair, breathing holes, wings, and appendages. It was similar to a giant that had the characteristics of various animals, but its overall structure was more like that of a human. Of course, it had long since died. The rotting and swollen corpses became the so-called forbidden zone for the giants, deliberately prohibiting all Eicher-related substances from approaching, thus giving rise to such a special area. 1,000 meters. It's too visually shocking. This kind of existence should be the legendary God's seed. However, his ending wasn't too good. It seemed that he had also spied on the inferiority of the Itra liquid and the truth of the world when he became a god. Because he hated the truth of the world so much, he might even pay the price of his own death to form an area that resisted the Itra liquid with his corpse as the center. It seems that the place we're looking for is here. Without hesitation, the three of them stepped on the soft surface of the tongue and entered through the mouth, following the rotten and smelly esophagus into the body. On the other side, due to the assistance of Giant Tree Ryan, with Bop as the captain and Demps as the guide, the star team reached the middle layer of the maze through the tree bridge. Helen's characteristics were also effective here. She could search for the flow of vitality between plants. Moreover, Aslan, who was holding an ice flame in her hand, and Eugenius, who was carrying a long spear on his back, also returned to the team. When the team came to a crossroads, Eugenius suddenly stopped. The eyes that popped out from his mouth carefully observed the flow of vitality between the walls. Wait, there's something wrong with this direction. The rejection of vitality is ridiculously strong. Not much Itra liquid will even flow over. Helen, come and take a look. Yes, it's true. Previously, the maze area didn't have such a situation. Even the outermost area of the maze would still have vitality flowing. Just like the structure of the human body, blood will reach any area and carry out the overall circulation. But if this direction continues, it's like a gangrene tissue. There's no blood circulation, and it even repels blood from getting close. About 100 meters in, the plants will start to die. Demps, who heard the conversation between the two, immediately changed the planned route. Let's go here. Maybe we can trigger a branch similar to the previous giant tree. If we're lucky, we might even touch the source of the infinite city. Captain Bop also immediately accepted the suggestion. Yes, let's go. Due to the previous cooperation, Bop's trust in Demps had reached a very high level. Bop would never doubt such a choice to lead the way. The walls on both sides were gradually replaced by giant corpses. When a 100-meter-tall head appeared at the end of the passage, Demps also smiled. He knew that he had come to the right place. Just as the team stepped on the tongue and was about to explore the giant's body, Eugenius, who was in charge of bringing up the rear, stopped again and turned his head to look behind him. Whoosh! An arrow made of light shot straight toward him. Eugenius' eyeballs could capture the trajectory of the arrow, and he was about to pierce it with his spear. Buzz! The arrow speeding through the air seemed to be blocked by some kind of stagnation, and waves of ripples spread out in the air. The arrow stopped in the air, unable to move forward. Immediately after, a few more arrows were shot, but the result was the same. They were all blocked in the air. The one who caused all this was Bop. He raised his arm and pointed it in the direction of the arrow. There are 5 of them. They look quite strong. Should we kill them? Eugenius' eyes had already locked onto the target. Let Hyde test them first. Hearing Bop's instructions, Darius Hyde had already condensed a ball of pure origin water in his palm. All the muscles in his body were tense, and even his gills were completely closed. The perfect combination of the Murloc's strength and the secret technique of the deep sea. The moment he made the throwing motion, all the fish scales on his body lit up with patterns that symbolized the deep sea. Buzz! When the perfect throwing motion was completed, the water droplet was still suspended above his palm. About 3 seconds passed. An indescribable pushing force acted on the surface of the water droplet. Buzz! The water droplet turned into an invisible object and shot toward the other party at a speed faster than an arrow. The outcome made Hyde frown slightly, and he gave an evaluation. There's actually someone who can block it. The other party is quite strong. If a battle breaks out here, it might waste a lot of our time. Let's go. Ignore them. Bop turned around with a nonchalant expression and continued walking toward the giant's body, completely ignoring the situation behind him. Eugenius suppressed the malice in his body and retracted his spear, responsible for covering the bottom. Aslan, on the other hand, had an indifferent expression. She put her hands in her pockets and walked in the middle of the team. However, about a few hundred meters behind them, the entire Greek team was in a state of shock. The water droplet that was shot at them just now was met head-on by the successor of the god of war, Theseus. It caused him to slide back a full 20 meters. His palm was still smoking, and there was a small hole in his protective gear. Who are these people? Chapter 1581. Entered the highest secret area, the Giant's Forbidden Area. Note: this area is formed by the corpse of God's seed, Ymir, human ancestor. Any giant who tries to approach will die quickly due to the loss of Iter from the heart and become a part of this area. Only those who don't rely on Iter are eligible to set foot here. Ymir, the first human giant? I guess may be right. When he became a god, he must have spied the truth of the world, or he chose to die under some kind of coercion, turning the corpse into a forbidden area. Only outsiders who are not affected by Iter are allowed to step into the body to find the so-called truth. By the way, this esophagus is really long, because they didn't feel any danger. Han Dong and others accelerated in the esophagus, and the overall trend was spiraling upward. Here we are. This is the stomach? It was completely different from the conventional stomach sac. The end of the esophagus corresponded to the internal space with a length and width of hundreds of meters. There were even upper and lower levels. The upper level belonged to the circular observatory. The lower level was similar to the structure of the fighting arena. The meat on the ground was completely dried and was quite solid. Such a stomach structure was by no means naturally formed. It was likely that after the death of Ymir, the giant deliberately transformed the stomach sac into this. The purpose was unknown for the time being. Just when Han Dong and others stepped in here, an ancient voice that was stored here resounded through the memory of the flesh rubbing against each other. A powerful outsider. I'm glad that you can come to my stomach palace without relying on venom. It proves that you can rely on yourself to find the truth of the world. Because of the shackles of venom Iter, no matter how strong you become, you can't break free from the shackles and can't destroy all this evil. In the end, I can only put all the treasures I got in my life into my body. When a real powerhouse like you who doesn't rely on venom comes and accepts my beliefs and gifts, you may be able to break this false truth and free the poor lives trapped in Infinite City and the surrounding areas. However, in addition to you reaching the Stomach Palace, there are other teams moving forward in the esophagus and are about to come here. Since there are multiple teams coming at the same time, I hope to give the treasures to the strongest among you. In this way, the success rate of my last wish may be increased. As for you, as the first team to come here, you'll get the priority to choose in the competition later. Huh, we were the first to find this place? What was the Greek team doing with their labyrinth ability? They must have used up the treasure map of destiny to come to this game, so it was impossible for them to clear it and leave. Could it be that there were other fortuitous encounters along the way? However, it's a good thing to have priority. Let's find a place to sit first. The three of them leaped onto the upper level of Stomach Palace. While waiting for the other teams, Han Dong also began to integrate his own characteristics and power. According to the last words of the giant Ymir, there would be an inevitable battle for the treasure. It all depended on how many teams could find this place. Han Dong hoped that there would only be one Greek team. Even if it was 3 against 5, he didn't care at all. However, as time passed, the Count, who was recuperating in his arm, suddenly smelled a stench. It was a stench that he would never forget. It was the most disgusting and evil smell of a monster hidden in the depths of the South Pole, among the black mountains of flesh. Eugene and the others are coming. With Count's reminder, Han Dong's plan was shattered. The most troublesome situation still happened. Han Dong wasn't worried about the teams from the other 2 superworlds. The only thing he cared about was the team from S01, led by Pope and guided by Demps. None of them could be easy to deal with. Grimm also smelled the scent of friends and slowly turned his vision to the entrance. Interesting. Did Pope and the others also find it? At the same time, Pope, who had just entered the Stomach Palace, also looked at the second floor of the observatory with his starry eyes. He wasn't surprised by Grimm and the others who came early. Instead, He showed a smile because Sally and Kit were no longer there. Pope and the others also received the same prompt from the giant emir, waiting for the third team that was passing through the esophagus. Pope sat across the observatory and didn't take the initiative to talk. Instead, the squinted Aslan asked curiously, "Why didn't I see Sally and Kit? Could something have happened to them? They're the world's treasure. If they fall here, it will be a great loss to our world." Han Dong responded with a smile. "Don't worry. They were only separated for some reason. Even if they didn't come here, they should still pass smoothly." "That's good." As Aslan spoke, he was still elegantly arranging his gloves. This was a set of magical equipment that he had spent a lot of effort to obtain, and it was perfectly compatible with his attributes. Not long after, the Greek team, led by Demis, entered. Pope originally looked down on this team that ambushed them and didn't plan to look at them. But as the whole team entered, a meteor suddenly flashed across his mind. He immediately locked onto the team at the bottom, a handsome young man with bandages wrapped around his eyes. Interesting. I didn't expect that at such a young age, he could reach such a height in terms of pure thinking. Even in this secret university, he would be an outstanding talent. At the same time, Han Dong's gaze also stopped on this young man. It was the beau, who was previously blinded and even had his brain contaminated. "So, this is the reason why you all stayed at the back. You really managed to seize the opportunity. This is a bit troublesome." Demis and the others also found an empty spot in the observation area and sat closely together, surrounding Beau in the middle. "How's your condition?" "Not bad. It's just that the next battle will definitely be very difficult. I will do my best." The waiting in the Stomach Palace didn't end with the arrival of the Greek team. Not long after, the fourth team also arrived. It was the Amyoji team from Sten Takamagura. The other two members were already in place. The captain was still the handsome Aoki Kasuk, who had a folding fan in his arms. His aura had changed greatly compared to before, and the Tengu hidden in the fan became restless after smelling the scent of the enemy. However, Han Dong's focus was on the two new members. The first was a black-skinned young man with a slender body. His exposed arms were dark purple in color and seemed to be imprinted with patterns similar to snake scales. The second was a swordsman whose gender was unknown and who wore a Persian mask. Waves of ghostly howls could even be faintly heard from the katana at his waist. Chapter 1582. As the fourth team arrived at Stomach Palace, giant Emir's body began to change. The tongue sticking out was retracting, and the mouth began to close slowly. Just then, two figures were rushing along the maze passage piled up with corpses. The sheep's hooves stepped forward. The elegant figure leaped into the air, and before the mouth was about to close, a forward roll jumped into it. "Kit, hurry up!" Kit's speed was obviously not as fast as Sally. Seeing that the mouth was already closed and the gap between the teeth was filled, he couldn't enter at all. "Paji!" All of a sudden, something fell down. Kit was secreting stinky mucus all over his body. Like applying lubricant, he drilled in through the nostrils full of festering tissue and fell directly behind Sally. Hey, even Sally, who lived in the Black Forest, was disgusted. Kit didn't care. He directly licked his whole body clean with his tongue. At this moment, Giant Emir's mouth was completely closed. The whole head was retracted into the body due to the characteristics of the turtle, and all the entrances to the body were closed. When Kit licked the dirty things on his body, he also licked the rotten tongue on the ground and accidentally got some information. There are other individual smells left here, too dense to distinguish. Since we didn't find Boss Green's trace in the center of the maze, it must be here. Then hurry up. The two sped up their pace and spiraled up the esophagus. When the two stepped into the Stomach Palace, even the esophagus was closed. Tut! When Aslan noticed the two people entering, her eyes that were closed slightly opened. She was a little upset. At the same time, the entrance was closed with the arrival of all the people. When Sally and Kit jumped onto the observation platform and rejoined the team, Stomach Palace began to tremble slightly, Strands of rotten flesh and blood accumulated in the center of the field, slowly condensing into a plump woman with hair all over her body. It represented a piece of consciousness left by Emer before her death, and it would choose the outsider who was qualified to inherit the treasure she left here. A total of 21 outsiders who are not affected by Aitcher are concentrated in my stomach palace, and then the only survivor will be selected through a full-scale melee to receive my treasure. Hearing this, everyone's eyes became ugly. They all came here in a small team. They didn't want to kill their teammates. Moreover, there was something wrong with the chaotic battle mode. There were two teams here that came from the same world. When someone wanted to give an opinion, the consciousness left by Emer was like a fixed program that did not listen to any opinions and would not change the rules at all. Next, let the melee begin. Drip, suddenly, some kind of liquid seeped into his stomach. At the same time, it carried with it an indescribably powerful aura. A drop of white liquid full of vitality happened to fall on the top of the head of Emer's residual consciousness. His words came to an abrupt halt. When she reached out to touch the liquid on top of her head, the most primitive feeling of fear was immediately aroused. How is this possible? How could the venom seep into my body cavity and come here? No, this concentration is even purer than the original liquid at the top of the mountain. What is it? When she looked up, a white figure quickly descended. Splat! The body that carried the remnant of Emer's consciousness was directly crushed by the invading mysterious man. With a casual grasp, the scattered pieces of flesh gathered directly in the palm of the mysterious man, condensing into a giant key that symbolized Emer, and even the consciousness was sealed in it. Sorry, I interrupted halfway. The game was in the testing stage, and it was not considered that so many people would arrive at the giant forbidden area simultaneously. The original rules were somewhat inappropriate. Next, I will reformulate the rules of the game. With the team as a unit, it will be fair and reasonable to compete for the ownership of the ultimate treasure. The man who crushed the first-generation giant and imprisoned the consciousness made the people present stunned. Even Bop couldn't see any information. Between the eyes of the stars, there was an unknown white. Only Han Dong knew who this person was. When he saw this person, Han Dong also instantly understood the nature of this game and what was going on. Ladybug game, Black Tower Design Department, as well as the Aitcher, liquid that stimulates the growth and composition of everything in the game. Everything was directly related to Mr. M. Wasn't the effect of this liquid similar to Mr. M's body fluid? It was just that some of the original liquid that was secreted into the game, because it was not directly controlled by Mr. M, it wantonly stimulated the matter, causing them to have a regular derivation and unlimited growth at the material level, directly creating the infinite city. It could even be said that Mr. M just casually spat out a mouthful of saliva and created the core area of the game and the related giant system. As for the Ladybug Foundation, one of the design departments of the Black Tower, it also belonged to Mr. M. The moment Han Dong's thoughts cleared, he was shocked. Sally, who was next to him, noticed the change in Han Dong's expression and asked softly, "Nicholas, do you know this person?" Han Dong didn't answer directly. Instead, he gently hugged Sally's slender waist and inserted his tentacles into her body. Through seemingly normal physical contact, he established a consciousness transmission. "Sally, this is the important person I mentioned in the Black Forest who can help Mother repair her injuries." "What?" Sally, who heard this, almost jumped up on the spot. Fortunately, she was held tightly by Han Dong. "Sally, you don't need to pay attention to anything. Just pay attention to the game. As for the problem of Mother, as repair, I will talk to this person in detail afterward." Okay. Sally naturally thought of the Aitcher liquid secreted by the mysterious person in front of her. An extremely small amount could create such an outrageous vitality environment like the Infinite City. Just as Han Dong said, if she could get a large amount of this liquid, she might really be able to repair her mother's injuries. She also secretly made up her mind to win the next game. At present, Mr. M, who was standing in the middle of the field, didn't pay any attention to Han Dong and treated everyone equally. Teams of powerhouses from different worlds, please listen to the rules of the game that I have temporarily formulated. First stage, individual confrontation. Each of you will need to send a team member to engage in a 4-person battle. The winner will advance to the final battle for the treasure. Such a battle will be conducted in 5 rounds, and a total of 5 people will be selected to advance. Considering that everyone is a genius from each world, in addition to death and elimination, the contestants can give up during the game, or the spectating team can decide to give up during the game. Once you give up, I will provide protection as soon as possible to ensure the safety of your lives. Mr. M pointed to the last Yin-Yang Master Team to arrive at the Stomach Palace. The first team will be sent out according to the order of the teams arriving at the Stomach Palace. This way, it was good to be in a hurry. As the first team to arrive here, Han Dong could wait until the last to decide on the team members to compete. This way, he could target them properly. Boss, I'll go first. They all look so strong. I can't hold it in anymore. Dong Yi, whose tongue was hanging out of his mouth, was drooling due to excitement. He was eager to go on stage. Dong Yi, you stay last. Let a Gue test the strength of the first game. The guys who can come here are not simple. The young man called a Gue pressed on the strange sword at his waist with one hand and the Hanya mask with the other. When his feet turned 90 degrees, he directly flashed from the spectator stand to the center of the field. Chapter 1583. The Greek team. Bo, whose eyes were wrapped in bandages, seemed to be able to see the other party's information through another layer of vision. At the same time, he could deduce the world they belonged to. S10, Takama Jihara. The original that came out is a bit strange. Whether it's the mask or the black sword hanging at his waist, they all feel like part of this person's body. Strange, the game clearly removed the original equipment, but this person was able to assimilate the equipment he just obtained not long ago to this extent. Moreover, the black sword seems to be specially used to kill ghosts. I don't recommend Feynman to go up. The rest will be arranged by you, sister. Demis looked around with a determined gaze. The outcome of the first round is very important. Once we win, we can ensure that one of us can participate in the final round, and the pressure on the subsequent round will be greatly reduced. This temporary Black Tower executive will also ensure absolute fairness. It may even favor us because the other party is from World S01. The first round, I'll go. Demis decided to personally go up for the first round. When she jumped down from the observation deck on the second floor, an elk that seemed to be formed by natural elements overflowing with azure light allowed her to land on its back. The most eye-catching thing was the elk's long horn with flowers and plants growing on it. It stepped lightly on the field. Riding on the elk's back, Demis looked down at Ghosty like a queen. She quietly used a method to send a message. Not long after, Ghosty responded with a nod. Immediately, Demi's gaze turned to the observation deck and naturally fell on Han Dong. She naturally wouldn't forget what happened before, and she issued a challenge with her gaze. Han Dong just shrugged. He had no intention of accepting the challenge. Moreover, Han Dong wasn't most concerned about the 2 people below the field, but the observation deck on the opposite side. Pop, who will go up for the first round? The view changed. Bop is considering it. And there was one thing to pay attention to. Team size. Pop's team had one more person than the other teams, 6 members. The first round of the competition had 5 rounds, which meant that one person only needed to watch the show. As for who was watching the show, it was obvious from Demp's smile. Letting the original body go up for the battle was more likely. Pop turned his gaze to Demps. Who do you think should go up for the first round? It's better for you to decide, Pop. Apart from Helen, my understanding of everyone is only superficial. However, I can make a suggestion. The point was not how to deal with the 2 players who had already entered the arena. Instead, I'm considering the arrangement of Nicholas and the others. Yes, Bop agreed with this statement. The stars in his brain were revolving rapidly. Eugene, how are you doing? Eugenus slowly opened his eyes. As he breathed, the plague spread evenly in his body. It was indeed the best choice to leave the first round to me. As expected of you, Eugenus did not use any exaggerated techniques. He landed on the field in the simplest way. The moment Eugenus entered the arena, he immediately felt a sense of prying. His eyes under the green hair quickly locked onto the Greek team's viewing area. His eyes met with Glass, who was observing him. The latter was so scared that he quickly looked away. He was afraid that he would encounter the same situation as before. Sister, this green-haired guy should be the same type as the youth who destroyed my eyes. Be careful of his eyes. I saw countless eyes crawling all over the body of a monster filled with filth, organs, and gelatinous tentacles. Very strong. You have to be careful. Eyes. Yes, I'll be careful. Seeing that the other party was no longer watching him, Eugenus calmly sat cross-legged on the field. He was using his fingernails to polish the stone spear he had obtained in the game. Its shape and weight were very similar to the spear of Achilles that he carried in his body. After experiencing the defeat in the South Pole, the realization of life and death in the London game, as well as fighting for the right to freedom for his clan and becoming the master of the Shugas clan, Eugenus' mentality had undergone a huge change. Moreover, for a period of time after the war, he had been comprehending the first part of the demonic book bestowed upon him by the old king, the necrophagy ritual. The content of this part was also transferred to the game very well. Eugenus' current state could be described as being as calm as still water. He did not care who his opponent was at all. Even if it was Grim, he would go all out. Grim, who was lying on the meat cushion, stared at the situation before him and commented softly. Eugenus will go first? You've really given us a difficult problem. Nicholas, what's your arrangement? Do you want me to take the lead? Grim, you're the key to our victory. Stay behind. How about this? Kit, you go. Me? Kit still hadn't recovered from his nervous state of being in a hurry and was currently pulling at the stitches on his body with a dispirited expression. I've already observed that Eugenus' condition is surprisingly good. Maybe he can completely kill you right here. The other two teams of competitors also seem to be leaning toward attacking and will similarly give you a fatal blow. Eugenus' condition seems to be really good. Speaking of which, if I die in the game, will I really die? Yes, your consciousness will be annihilated along with this body. Good. Kid immediately became interested and wanted to jump directly into the field, but he was careless and tripped over the railing of the viewing platform. He fell straight down from the platform, face first. Crack! The sound of the bridge of his nose and cervical vertebrae breaking rang out at the same time, painful to watch. Such a scene made the outsiders who didn't understand Kit feel incomparably puzzled. Only Eugenus showed an uncomfortable expression. The one he didn't want to face the most was Kit. No matter how much Eugenus' strength increased, he didn't have the confidence to control such an unstable body as Kit. If he didn't control it well, it could cause irreparable damage to his consciousness. How troublesome. I hope there won't be any accidents, Kit. Everyone entered the field. The first match was about to begin. Currently, the field was covered with a thin layer of white liquid, preventing everyone's movements. Mr. M's avatar reminded them again. There are no rules or restrictions in individual combat. As long as 2 or more people don't die, forfeit, or lose the ability to move, the competition will continue. Remember, as soon as you feel you can't beat your opponent, do your best to forfeit. Death is the stupidest choice. When the liquid under your feet has completely seeped into the ground, it means the competition has begun. Good luck to you. For a moment, the atmosphere in the stomach palace became tense. It took about 10 seconds for the liquid to seep into the ground. Ghosty and Demis both had a certain amount of small movements. Eugenus was still sitting on the ground, his long spear leveled in his hand and his eyes closed. As for Kit, he had just set his broken cervical vertebrae and didn't know what to do. He didn't even hear clearly what the referee was saying. Just then, the liquid completely disappeared, and the competition began. Demis, riding an elk, directly joined forces with Ghosty from Takamagara to attack Kit, who still didn't know what to do and was scratching his head. Before entering the field, Demis had suggested to Ghosty that they join forces. After all, the other two teams were hybrid demons from S01. They would wait until the hybrid demons were eliminated before they could compete with each other. And their target was naturally the seemingly stupid Kit. If they could eliminate him in one fell swoop, the following 2v1 would be much simpler. Clang! A strong wave of air rippled out from the stomach palace. The stupefied Kit was unscathed and looked slightly disappointed. In front of him was the green-haired Eugenus, using his long spear to clamp down on the black sword and using his mouth to bite down on the incoming arrow. The green plague emitted from his body was slowly filling the field. Crack! He bit down on the arrow and stared at the two people in front of him with a look of contempt. Don't touch him if you want to die. Fight me if you want. Eugenus wasn't actively providing protection, but he was worried that the two people's attacks would break through Kit's outer skin and expose his terrifying, chaotic body. Outside the field, Han Dong seemed to have just spied on something. The aura that Eugenus had released in the instant of his action contained something Han Dong had never seen before, an extremely dangerous and frightening aura. Chapter 1584. Clang! Eugenus, who had temporarily taken control of the situation, had a mouth grow from the back of his head to talk to the protected Kit. Kit, show me some ability. First get rid of these two, then we can talk about the matter between us. But, no matter what Eugenus said, Kit still had a dispirited expression, and he used his fingers to touch the stitches on his face. Oh, but it's troublesome. Both of them are very strong, and it's not easy to win. But I promised Nicholas that I would take it seriously. Let me think of a way first, and when I do, I'll help you. Speaking of which, Kit actually turned to face the wall, as if he was reflecting on his mistakes. He didn't consider the battle happening in front of him. TSK. Eugenus could only grit his teeth and ignore him. After all, when the other side had selected Kit, Eugenus had already made plans for a 1v2 currently. The green plague released by Eugenus had already filled the competition area. The two opponents had never seen such a vile plague before, so they temporarily distanced themselves. Demi's released a natural domain to isolate the plague, and at the same time, she filled her nostrils with grass to block out the extremely foul odor. As she re-examined Eugenus, she vaguely spied an amorphous nightmare creature. There's such a foul, evil life form in the world? It's disgusting. If S-01 is under the jurisdiction of the Black Tower, this thing will definitely be listed as a rampager. I'll execute it ahead of time. On the other side, Ghosty from Takamagara also released her domain. With him as the center, twisted, ghostly faces constantly rose from the ground to counteract the plague. While the two were gradually adapting to the plague, Eugenus warned again in a stern voice. If you don't want to die, if you don't want this game to end like this, don't touch this guy. If you have the ability, kill me first. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Four dark green tentacles grew from Eugenus' right arm, wrapping around the spear shaft to increase control. His gaze first locked onto the woman on the elk's back. In his eyes, the woman was more of a threat. Not to mention that the life force she constantly emitted made Eugenus feel disgusted. The arrows she shot were extremely aggressive, and if left alone, there would be endless arrows. The most dangerous thing was the divinity the woman carried. It had to be dealt with first, just as Eugenus was halfway there. Buzz! His consciousness trembled. It wasn't because of the enemy's influence, but because of the discomfort in his body. An ancient language that few people knew of spread in Eugenus' consciousness, even gnawing on the surface of his brain like teeth. Don't worry. Now is not the time for you to appear. A wave of soul pressure from Shugas immediately suppressed the thing in his body. However, it was just a momentary disturbance. By the time Eugene came back to himself, more than 10 arrows had been shot at him from the front, blocking all the possible escape routes. Open your throat. I was squeezed out of the throat. See-through, it had a similar effect as Han Dong's demon eye. It could instantly see through the paths of all the arrows and analyze the best way to deal with them. Sweep. He swept away some of the arrows with his spear. Taking advantage of the gap between the sweep, his body took the opportunity to dodge. The moment he dodged, Eugene's eyes widened and his antennae tightened. A drop of cold sweat slid down his cheek. At this moment, the young man, named Ghosty, was standing behind him, and his right thumb was already on the scabbard. The domain of the young man had already locked onto Eugenus, not giving him any chance to escape. Eugenus felt that there were countless ghost hands rising from his feet and crawling all over his body. It wasn't just a physical restriction. Eugenus' six senses were all slowed down and weakened because of this. Oh no, the blade was unsheathed. The blade was carved with countless ghost heads. As it was unsheathed, Ghosty placed his 5 fingers on the blade and slowly pulled it down. When his fingers brushed past the ghost heads carved on the blade, they all came to life, and a terrible aura of resentment came out of their mouths. When he saw this scene, Glass, who came from Olympus, was shocked. He suddenly remembered the knowledge that he had read in books before. Could this guy be? It was rumored that in Takamajahara, in addition to humans, yin-yang masters, and gods and demons, there was a special existence called the demon swordsman. Some of the famous swords made by grandmasters were left in the hands of different swordsmen to fight against demons. The demons that were beheaded would leave a part of their resentment in the blade. Over time, the resentment would grow into a more perfect demon sword. However, it would become more and more difficult for the user to control it, and they might even be completely controlled by the demon sword. A very small number of demon swords had a very strong backlash, and no one could control them at all. In a situation where there was no user, the demon sword evolved its own consciousness and even condensed a physical body. This was called the demon swordsman. No wonder when I was observing, I felt that the sword and the physical body were one. I see. Its name seems to be Ghost. Cut. Glass looked through the countless demon corpses and saw 2 words on the surface of the blade at the top. Ghost cut. On the other side of the spectator stand. Ha! Kagaya knocked the folding fan in his hand and smiled. Got it. Whoosh. A perfect black arc of light slashed across the center of the arena. Dark green and extremely smelly blood splashed in the arena. Even when Eugenus was hit, he turned around and blocked the stone spear in front of him, but it was still useless. Such a perfect slash was unstoppable. Crack! The stone spear was cut in half along with Eugenus' body. The 2 halves of the stone spear were thrown out. Eugenus' abdomen was completely cut open and was barely connected by a piece of skin on his back. A few drops of the dark green blood that splashed out even landed on Kit, who was facing the wall. Kit didn't mind this smelly liquid. He dipped his hand in it and put it in his mouth. The battle wasn't over yet. Whoosh! Whoosh! 5 arrows of light, emitting vitality, shot out in succession. They all pierced into Eugenus' head, and because of the repelling nature of the elements, a large amount of smoke rose from where the arrows had pierced through, and pus kept flowing out. The entire head was slowly turning into thick water. Demis was still not at ease and continued to attack. Zhang Gong's full bow, a different arrow condensed in the middle of the longbow. There were flowers on the surface of the arrow, and it was different from the previous arrows. Ghosty also prepared to attack. However, this was also part of the process of killing demons that he was used to beheading. Staring at the situation in front of them, the teams from the other 2 world and the spectator stands all believed that the hybrid demons would die, and that one of them would win the first round. As for Kit, he was still leaning against the wall, and no one knew what he was thinking. Thud! Ghosty took a step forward and came to the effective beheading range. Once he beheaded Eugenus, it would be equivalent to an indirect death sentence. At the same time, Demis had finished charging up. An arrow full of vitality turned into a white light and aimed directly at Eugenus' heart. The blade, filled with the howling of ghosts, also slashed at Eugenus' head at the same time. Suddenly, a terrifying domain spread out. The green plague that had been spreading throughout the scene sank into the ground, and eyes of different sizes opened from the ground. Eugenus' sliced open abdomen turned into the world's dirtiest ancient mouth, filled with endless sin and evil. Every tooth embedded in it could be traced back to a corpse cult member who had been spurned by tens of thousands of people in history. Gliluojizayan, ancient language, sounded in the stomach. Even though Ghosty had immediately retreated, one of his arms had already disappeared. Chapter 1585. Demonic Book, a supreme treasure born from the unique system of the S01 world. When the world was first born, the Black Tower tried to copy the demonic book, but it was impossible. Later, it was finally confirmed that this was a product unique to the S01 world, and only extreme existences like the hybrid demons could read and cultivate it. To other creatures, the demonic book was even more deadly than poison. These demonic books were not created by an ancient king himself, but were closely related to the chaotic nature of the world. Most of them came from unknown sources. When they were discovered, they had already taken away a civilized country. They had even turned an unknown planet into an extremely dangerous, forbidden land that could threaten the hybrid demons. Or when they were written, they directly stripped the entire planet and the space around it, drifting through the space cracks until they were accidentally seen by an ancient king. Cadaveric ritual, discovered in the prehistoric era, a planet that was also inhabited by humans, hundreds of thousands of light years away from Earth. At that time, the human race was only recognized as a race with high intelligence but extremely weak bodies, and their status was very low. The level of this planet was also categorized as a lower class. One day, this planet that was categorized as a lower class and only had human activities had a series of deaths of hybrid demons, and the nature of it was terrible. Some of the hybrid demons that were sent to this planet by the ancient king in an attempt to recruit human believers were all devoured by the basic teachers, and when they were discovered, even the corpses of the hybrid demons were eaten clean. This incident alarmed the existence in the void. When the planet was recategorized, it was found that the planet's chaos index had increased by hundreds of times, and the level of danger had even exceeded some of the forbidden land at that time. The humans living on this planet, although their appearance and body shape remained the same, their insides had completely changed. This planet was then listed as a forbidden land and renamed as Cadaver Prison. In the end, a special elite hybrid demon group, after many hardships, arrived at the core of the planet and finally found out the cause of all this. The origin of all these changes was the demonic book, Cadaveric Ritual, created by a human named Francois Honor Balfour when he fell into a strange dream after eating his entire family raw. When it was discovered, this person had completely merged with the demonic book, turning into a bloody mouth that occupied the abyss. When the demonic book was handed over to the void, through the void secret technique, he went deep into the author's consciousness in an attempt to find out the experience of creating the demonic book. If he knew, the author did not retain any memory of that night when he created the demonic book in his dream. He did not have the ability to create such a demonic book. It was as if it was some kind of chaotic power hidden within World S01 itself. Coincidentally, it intertwined with this human who had an extreme mental state, using his mental state and desires as a medium to create this demonic book. Such a situation only happened to humans. It was also from then on, the existence of the void dimension began to take an interest in this weak race. Later on, the corpse-eating cult's ritual was naturally handed over to some talented hybrid demons who had compatible attributes to try reading and learning it. However, the effect wasn't very good. It even caused some of the mantis demons who had the potential to create mythical creatures to eat their own bodies. A portion of the hybrid demons realized the danger and returned the demon book. The University ME library also rejected this book due to the high value of the book due to confusion. Based on the performance of the London Game Room, the first part of the corpse-eating cult's ritual was given to Eugenius, who had a perfect Shugus body and was extremely determined and revered. During the sleepless night of studying and studying, Eugenius gradually understood the horror of the book. Even as the new ruler of Shugus, he felt a sense of fear that spread to his bones. The more he read, the more intense the primitive fear in his body became. The night Eugenius completely learned the first part, he fell into a dream that lasted for 100 years, one night in reality. In the dream, Eugenius was born as a human child. When he became an adult, he created an extreme cult called the corpse-eating cult. He started to devour and assimilate the surrounding environment until he completely occupied the entire planet and ended his life. When Eugenius woke up from the dream, he found that he had eaten himself to the point where only his head and half of his body were left. He was on the verge of death. He was so scared that he immediately ordered the ancients to reconstruct his body. When he was soaking in the recovery liquid, the most familiar voice in the dream came from his body. Leader, that's right. The corpse-eating cult that Eugenius had created in the dream actually existed in a physical form in his body. And the core members of the cult grew in the form of teeth in his body. The mythical drawing that could not be changed had an additional seal that was customized by Eugenius in the dream. Yes, with the perfect body of the Shugas family and his own strong will, Eugenius accepted and controlled the corpse-eating cult's ritual. This was also why he was not afraid to challenge anyone. The perfect replication of abilities in the Ladybug game also brought the corpse-eating system. It was completely activated through the Ogre bloodline level that Eugenius exchanged at the city wall. Although it was far from being as powerful as in reality, it was completely enough in the game. The stone spear obtained in the game was just an external object that Eugenius used to attract the attention of others. The real horror was the corpse-eating cult in Eugenius' body. When Sally saw this scene on the field, she instantly felt that her position as the fourth prime was no longer guaranteed. Ha ha! Eugenius, you're really good. Come on, hurry up and kill them. Grimm was also excited because of this and even cheered for Eugenius. On the field, crunch, crunch. The big mouth that grew on Eugenius' abdomen was chewing the arm from the ghost cutter. Each tooth that symbolized the corpse-eating cult seemed to be chewing the arm and then sending it to the depths of the cult for sacrificial processing. As the sacrificial ritual progressed, Eugenius' head was rapidly mending. As the big mouth on his waist closed, the wound on his waist was also completely healed. Whoosh, whoosh. A series of light arrows shot from behind. This time, Eugenius no longer dodged. His eyeballs were all over the field, and he had a panoramic view of the paths of all the arrows. When the arrows were about to get close, the corresponding mouth grew directly behind him and swallowed all the arrows. There was no deviation. At the same time, whoosh, two mouths grew out of Eugenius' left and right palms. He changed his target. He locked his gaze on the ghost cutter that had just ambushed him from behind and tried to behead him. Moreover, the other party's combat strength was greatly reduced because he had lost an arm. Charge forward. Eugenius' speed was faster than before. Clang! When the ghost cutter's blade slashed over, it was directly bitten by the mouth on Eugenius' left palm. His right hand squeezed through the gap and directly grabbed the ghost cutter's head. Whether it was speed, strength, or nerve reflexes, they were all faster than before. He was simply a monster, just as he was about to swallow the other party's head. Buzz! A ball of white liquid blocked in front of Eugenius. The referee made his move. The Onmyoji team has forfeited. The remaining 3 people, please continue the competition. Shunjie, who was sitting in the spectator's stand, observed the terrifying changes in Eugenius. Considering that the ghost cutter's important right hand had been crippled and its combat strength had been greatly reduced, he decisively forfeited. Eugenius had no intention of killing his opponent. He turned to look at the woman on the elk's back. Chapter 1586. Eugenius is so strong. Is this the power of the demonic book? As the captain, Shinsuke voluntarily forfeited on behalf of his teammate. Han Dong was so excited that he got up from his seat and focused his magic eye on Eugenius' body. Through the mouth that grew between his palms, he seemed to see a world inside Eugenius' body, a deformed world formed by a group of strange corpse cultists who were eating all kinds of raw meat. It was even worse than many hybrid demon cities. Unbelievable. When this is over, I have to use my identity as an associate professor to get the right to borrow the demonic book. Han Dong was not worried about Eugenis' strength at all. Only his absolute desire for knowledge about the demonic book was ranked first among Han Dong's many desires. On the field, Demis, who was riding on the back of an elk, had long felt the danger from Eugenis. At the same time, she felt an absolute sense of self-blame. Why did I miss such a good opportunity? If I had only used God's descent just now, or at the beginning of the match, none of this would have happened. She was full of regret. But who would have thought that, just now, when Eugenis was cut in half at the waist and his head was pierced by many arrows, from the perspective of most people, it was a dead end. Moreover, in the Ladybug game where levels were suppressed, such injuries were basically impossible to recover, let alone resist. But reality proved that. They who had never come into contact with S01 did not know enough about hybrid demons. Now, Demis and the other non-S01 spectators finally understood. What they were facing, or were about to face, was not a genius or a powerhouse of the same level. It was a monster that belonged to world S01 and surpassed common sense. To defeat this group of monsters, they had to use all their strength, see through every detail, and seize every opportunity to have a chance. God's descent, Artemis. A silver moon was imprinted between Demis's eyebrows. The silver moonlight emitted from her body sprinkled all over the field, forcibly tearing apart Eugenis' eyeball domain. In an instant, a large number of palm trees and cypress trees rose from the field, turning it into a hunting forest. The moment the dense forest was formed, Demis's aura was completely lost. It actually disappeared from my eyes. Eugenis put his hand on the surface of a palm tree, trying to make the eyeball plague spread quickly in the forest. Whoosh! An arrow was shot from the forest. Because the firing speed was exactly the same as before, Eugenis had no intention of dodging. Once the arrow got close to the zombie eater's body, it would be swallowed and quickly digested. What? Something unexpected happened. The light arrow flying in the air transformed into a hunting dog. There was no interval between the changes, and Eugene had no time to react. Whoosh! The canine teeth were as sharp as arrows, directly tearing off a large piece of flesh from Eugene's back. The surface of the wound was also covered with spots similar to moonlight, which were constantly eroding the flesh. The investigation of the eyeball in the forest was also forced to stop. Has the attack pattern changed? After Eugenis treated the wound, he traveled through the forest as fast as he could. Every time he passed through a tree, there would be a slight movement of his palm. Whoosh! Whoosh! At this moment, 4 arrows were fired at Eugenis from different positions. So fast, the 4 arrows were shot almost at the same time. Because he had just suffered a loss. Eugenis watched the 4 arrows in front of him seriously, ready to break them one by one. Who knew? When the first arrow got close, it didn't turn into any animal. Instead, it had the effect of a flash bomb, emitting a strong light from the inside. It was so dazzling that Eugenis couldn't open his eyes at all. They were even smoking. Some of the compound eyes, which grew on different parts of Eugenis' body and were used to assist in observation, directly turned into thick water. Next, 3 arrows. One transformed into a giant bear and threw Eugenis to the ground. It smacked his head and bit his neck. One transformed into a crescent hunting dog and instantly bit Eugenis' legs. The surface of the wound was still covered with irrecoverable moonlight spots. One transformed into an eagle and hovered in the air, observing every detail of Eugenis' body. Once Eugenis made any small movements, the eagle would tear him apart with its claws. You want to kill me with this trick? An extreme stench spread through the forest. The giant bear's head was crushed by Eugenis' zombie eater system. At the same time, a large number of tentacles, which symbolized shogs, rose, piercing the hunting dog and entangling the eagle in the air. At the cost of revealing part of his true body, he resolved the dilemma in front of him. His legs were crippled, and his wounds were corroded by the moonlight and could not be healed. Creak, creak, creak. Tentacles grew out and replaced his legs. He quickly slid through the forest. Just like before, he reached out and touched every tree he passed. The competition developed into a drama of a hunter hunting a monster. Every time an arrow was shot, the injuries in Eugenius' body would accumulate one layer. Of course, Eugenius, I was also gradually covering the entire forest. It would have to wait for a certain time. Perspective-switching Demis, who was secretly moving through the forest, was completely immersed in hunting mode. Whether it was the restraint of the pure moonlight against the hybrid demon or the field she had created, she had an absolute advantage. But there was no joy in Demis's eyes. Instead, they became more and more cloudy. Her attention began to wander. From time to time, she would look to the other side, at the hybrid demon who had stayed by the side wall the entire time and hadn't done anything. The reason for this was that the hunting forest formed by God's descent was unable to cover the area around this person. Moreover, she didn't know Kit and didn't know the nature of this hybrid demon. She also didn't know what he wanted to do. As time passed, Kit's presence became more and more noticeable. Demis kept feeling that the other party had been secretly accumulating dangerous secret techniques that could threaten her at any time. A hybrid demon who can come here can't be passive in the competition. He must be plotting something, and he might even cover my hunting forest. If I leave him alone, something will definitely happen. Taking advantage of the fact that this is still my home field, getting rid of him is the best choice. As she made her decision, whoosh, an arrow shot towards Kit, transforming into a silver moon hound before it hit. It locked onto the defenseless Kit and tried to kill him in one bite. Whoosh! The fangs smoothly sank into Kit's neck, just as it was about to tear off his entire head. Pa! A drop of extremely cloudy blood splashed on the hound's surface, corruption and degeneration. The hound transformed from the arrow of light instantly swelled, twisted, and had its internal organs overturned. It went beyond common sense. Pa! It exploded into pieces. It didn't turn into photons and disappear. Instead, it became a solid, broken corpse. The attribute of light had undergone a fundamental change after being tainted by Kit's blood. It had degenerated into a physical living creature with flesh and blood. Demis had never seen this scene before, and she couldn't understand it at all. The primitive fear of the unknown made her take 2 steps back, and her state of mind fluctuated slightly. It was also at this moment that she recognized Kit as a true filth that had to be removed, even if this wasn't a competition that involved benefits. As the heir of the Olympian gods, she had to eradicate this evil. How evil? I have to get rid of this evil thing. After saying that, she took the initiative to move closer to Kit while maintaining her hunting of Eugenius. Chapter 1587. The spectators in the stands were naturally clear about the situation on the field. The direct improvement brought about by God's descent made Bop ponder, and he had to seriously consider the following matches. Demis's display of a hunting attack was enough to prove her strength as a team leader. Only, the situation on the field wasn't developing well, and it even made Bop a little nervous. He could see that Demis's state of mind was changing, and because of her grasp of the situation, her center of gravity had shifted until a part of it had completely fallen on Kit. Suddenly, Demis's state of mind completely changed, and her eyes changed, and her killing intent rose as she sped straight toward Kit. That scene made Bop's hair stand on end, and he even directly transmitted to Han Dong across from him, regardless of the fact that they were enemies. Kit isn't suited to participate in such a match. This woman from another world has the ability to kill hybrid demons. If something were to happen to Kit, I'm afraid it wouldn't just be the game. Even his true body would be completely out of control. We would all be in danger. Nicholas, do you understand what I mean? Han Dong was a little surprised at first. He hadn't thought that Bop would actually be unable to sit still, but also prove that Kit's potential danger wasn't something that even Bop could control. Actually, Han Dong was just as nervous. He had been to the Ladybug Foundation and knew that everyone's true bodies were isolated in different game rooms. If Kit's intention was to die there, his uncontrolled body would be completely messed up, and the worst-case scenario would lead to the destruction of the Foundation, the collapse of the world, and his party would be consigned to eternal damnation. Still, Han Dong chose to believe. After all, the team had been created by Han Dong, and Kit's attitude was very clear. I had an exchange with Kit before the match, and he promised me that he would take the game seriously. If it really comes to a critical juncture, I will voluntarily forfeit. Bop didn't say anything else. The reason he was so worried was that his understanding of Kit was higher than that of the other original substances. It wasn't just from his knowledge of the Void. In the previous original substance game, it had been Bop who had eliminated Kit as ninth, and the dangerous situation he had faced at the time was something that Bop would never forget. After the match, he had been reflecting on the matter and had determined that his encounter with Kit was a major mistake in his decision-making. If he hadn't handled it properly at the time, Bop might have been eliminated. All of a sudden, Bop thought of something as a comet flashed across his mind. "Kit, did you do it on purpose?" Whoosh, whoosh. Demis had completely viewed Kit as a source of evil that had to be eliminated. 3 arrows were shot in succession. Every arrow would receive Demis' life blessing when it was shot out, allowing it to obtain the corresponding characteristics, transform into a beast, or have special arrow effects. Giant Bear, Mad Wolf, Wild Boar. The beastly arrow charged towards Jeter. The outcome was still the same. Because they had all been contaminated with Kit's blood, they had degenerated and mutated and could only cause the first wave of damage. However, the moonlight imprint left on Kit's body would continue to exert its purifying effect. I know what to do. Demis first observed the situation in the forest to make sure that Eugene wouldn't come looking for them immediately. His brain had already drawn up a plan to kill Kit. Whoosh! Another arrow was shot. Gaga. The arrow turned into a flock of birds along the way, circling around Kit's surroundings to obstruct his perception. Using the moon mark between her eyebrows, Demis condensed 5 different silver arrows and shot them into the sky. Rain of arrows. The 5 arrows formed a parabola and fell around Kit, creating a circle of purification that originated from the Temple of Olympus. Tap, tap, tap. The moose carrying Demis also arrived at the same time, approaching Kit by about 3 meters. 10 fingers interlocked in front of her chest, slowly floating in the air. Like a goddess of the moon, she was chanting in the most pious manner. As the words were recited, the moon mark between her eyebrows became brighter. Just then, Kit, who had no desire to fight and even looked like he was about to die, suddenly changed his expression. A low whisper sounded in Demis' ear. "The thing I'm the worst at is finding people. And once I take action, I have to consider many factors. It's too troublesome. Even Eugene couldn't find you in a short amount of time, so I won't be able to find you. Sure enough, it's better to make your presence known. You only need to stay in one place and do a few special things to attract extra attention. It's exactly the same as in the original game. Domain release. A stench that even Eugene couldn't stand spread out in the stomach area. Even Mr. M, the referee, revealed a vigilant look. Presence. This was the simplest solution Kit could think of. In the dense forest, Eugene, who was gliding rapidly, suddenly smelled a pungent odor. He could sleep in the sewers for months without leaving. When necessary, even if it was the excrement of other creatures, he could normally absorb it and turn it into his own energy. But this odor made Eugene want to vomit. This woman really isn't afraid of death. Tell her not to touch Kit. If she loses control, we'll all be finished. Furious and worried, Eugene no longer set up traps. He followed the scent and chased at full speed. Splat! When he stepped out of the dense forest, he stepped into a filthy, gray quagmire. In just a moment of contact, pustules grew on the soles of Eugene's feet. Even as a mantis, he was affected by Kit. This is Kit's domain, a shrunken version in the game. In the center of the quagmire, There was a hemispherical space made of the ultimate filth. It seemed that Kit and Demis were fighting inside. Just as Eugene was about to approach, a strong light penetrated the top of the hemispherical space, and the entire structure collapsed. Just then, at the same time, a scream from Demis echoed through her stomach. She had long since lost her posture as a goddess. Because she had been deeply corroded by the filth, even her divinity was distorted. Her internal organs were all in disorder, and even turned into living creatures that scuttled and gnawed on her body. Slimy tentacles of various lengths and sizes grew out of her pores, licking and even playing with her body. In addition, Kit, who had been affected by the purification ritual, was also not in a good state. His body had basically turned into an amorphous lump of mud. One could barely make out half of his face, 2 legs, and an arm that held the evil book. Eugene wanted to go forward and finish him off. But when he looked at the deeply contaminated Demis, he restrained his anger and put away his killing move, revealing a meaningful smile. Forfeit. When Glass requested to forfeit, Demis, who had been sent back, was convulsing constantly. Even the treatment of the brilliant light was of no help. Eugene stared at the Greek team in the stands and said with a wicked smile, "Hey, that little guy who was peeking at me just now, if you want her to live, you'd better leave her alone. If you treat her with your methods, you'll probably kill her." Then he turned to the partially paralyzed Kit. "Kit, I didn't expect you to be serious. Ugh, you're really stinky. Hurry up and end our battle. I don't want to provoke a stench that can't be cleansed." Just as Eugene was about to compete with Kit, suddenly, the referee grabbed Eugene's arm and raised it up. All 3 contestants have forfeited. The winner of the first match is Eugene Trevello of Team Constellation. What? Eugene looked at the stands in surprise. Han Dong was raising his hand to signal his forfeit. "Nicholas, what do you mean? Didn't you let Kit participate in the first match to target me?" Han Dong hurriedly waved his hand. "Don't misunderstand. The first match is the most unpredictable. We're just letting Kit try first. Since the results are good, we'll end it in time. It won't do us any good to go on. And Eugene, you're really good. Congratulations." For a moment, Eugenius could not figure out what Han Dong was planning. But such an ending was also for the best. Eugene had never wanted to confront Kit head-on. Chapter 1588. Just as Eugene warned, when Beau tried to heal his sister Demis's injuries, the situation would become even more serious. When he cut, burned, or pulled out the slippery tentacles growing out of her body, it was like tearing off Demis's entire finger. It was so painful that her whole body trembled and she foamed at the mouth. Moreover, after a while, new tentacles would grow out of her pores. Various forms of brilliant light purification would also burn Demis until she screamed crazily. It seemed that the essence of her soul had changed. Moreover, Feynman, who held the power of death in the team, also stated a very terrifying fact. Demis seemed to be seriously injured and could die at any time. But Feynman didn't feel the aura of death at all. On the contrary, Demis seemed to be full of vitality because of the tentacles all over her body. It was even stronger than when she was in a healthy state. It was just that this vitality was full of chaos and depravity. Feynman muttered, "The rumor is true. Those who come into contact with the S01 hybrid demon will suffer an unavoidable contamination. Even a true god can't completely resist it." Thinking of this, Feynman gave a signal with his eyes. Minotaur Norn and War General Deus jointly supported Beau, his body, and brought him away from Demis' side to prevent the contamination from spreading to Beau, who was immersed in grief, suddenly thought of something and immediately knelt down to beg. "Mr. Referee, I beg you to save my sister." In the blink of an eye, Mr. M had arrived in front of Demis. He knew very well that the group of people participating in the competition were all geniuses from various superworlds. Of course, he didn't want to lose such a talent. The contamination Demis suffered is completely different from the hybrid demon contamination I've seen. It's even fundamentally different. Even the other mantis demon present was affected. following the referee's reminder. The Greek team glanced at Eugene, who had just returned to the spectator stand. Because he had stepped into the muddy quagmire, the lower part of Eugene's calf was full of rotten and pus-filled blisters. There were even mucus tentacles that belonged to Kit growing on the surface of his tentacles. However, it was only a superficial infection. Eugene gritted his teeth and amputated on the spot. The contamination Demi's suffered has completely seeped into the depths. Even her consciousness has been eroded, causing a fundamental disorder. This is the only way. Mr. M stretched out his hand and placed it on the surface of Demi's skin. Strands of white liquid named ichor in the game were injected into her body. He slowly squeezed the pollution out of his body through various parts of his body. I can only help her clean up the filth between her body and soul. As for her body of consciousness that has already been corroded, I can't interfere. What will happen in the end will depend on how long she can persevere. Let's prepare for the worst. Thank you, Mr. Referee. Prepare the candidates for the next round. In addition, the reason for her loss was due to her own misjudgment. If I hadn't temporarily acted as the referee and changed the rules of the competition, she would have already died. Therefore, I hope that you can calm down and take the upcoming competition seriously. I understand. It was indeed Big Sister's mistake, and Big Sister also caused great harm to the other party. I won't hate you because of this. This is our journey of destiny. The reason why Mr. M said so much was that he hoped the group of young people would not be impulsive. Otherwise, if they were to fight to the death with the hybrid demons due to their hatred, they might end up in a tragic situation where all of them fell. If that happened, Olympus, as S06, would have a lot of complaints. View switching Han Dong gently patted the mud-like Kit and handed over several bottles of recovery medicine, as well as the fat liquid obtained from killing the celestial species. Kit wasn't picky at all. He directly took the purple quality fat concentrate as a tonic and gulped it down. His mud-like body could be seen with the naked eye slowly mending itself, only becoming a little fatter than before. There was a feeling that he would be mended into a fat otaku. At this time, Green, who had crossed his legs on the railing, suddenly asked, "Nicholas, why did you forfeit?" Even if Kit's condition was extremely bad and he was forced to fight to the death, whether it was Pope in the stands or Eugenus on the field, they would inevitably consider outside factors and give way, thus allowing Kit to advance. Being able to let me clearly see Eugenus' true strength is enough. Besides, Kit has already done his best. Stubbornly holding on could really be dangerous. Also, when I saw Eugenus display the characteristics of the corpse-feeding ritual, I was momentarily excited. It would be better to leave Eugenus for the finals and let us have some fun. What do you say, Green? Ha ha ha. I knew you were thinking this way. Green laughed heartily after getting the answer he wanted the most. He excitedly hugged Han Dong's shoulder, and the two of them leaned close together. Say, who's going next? Let's see how they arrange it first. Beyond my OG team, Shinushi stared at the unconscious Demis, and his fear of the hybrid demons increased by another layer. However, he also saw some clues. The hybrid demon that caused contamination damage to Demis seemed to belong to a very special category. When another hybrid demon talked to him, his eyes revealed a kind of disgust and fear. Shinushi came to a conclusion. Such a high level of contamination may be limited to this hybrid demon called Kit. Even if the other hybrid demons are powerful, under the game's restrictions, the contamination is limited. After all, we had battle experience with them in advance and weren't affected much by the contamination. As for the second match, Shinushi turned to his teammate with a slender body covered in snake patterns and a skin color between purple and black. Lu Ji, I'll leave it to you. I believe in your strength and judgment. As long as you perform normally, it'll be fine. If I feel that your condition isn't quite right and there's a tendency to develop into danger, I'll take the initiative to help you forfeit. Okay. The man under the hood only nodded slightly, and his movements were already silent as he landed on the field. Bo stared at his unconscious sister, and his emotions had already stabilized. When he tried to use X-ray vision on the man in the field, he felt like he had fallen into a pitch-black snake cave. Snake, could it be? Bo's thoughts had already changed. He no longer needed to consider how to deal with the Takamajahara members. Instead, he needed to consider them as a cooperative partner and how to achieve the most effective cooperation. Norn, you have the highest compatibility with this person. He has a fatal ability and will definitely be a threat to the hybrid demons, or even kill them. Cooperate with this person and win this match. Okay, Norn. This person was the Greek warrior who had previously controlled the labyrinth. He was born with a pair of bull horns on his forehead, which was a divine characteristic of a perfect character. He had an exaggerated physique of more than 2 meters, and when he jumped off the field, his stomach was trembling slightly. As the two of them exchanged glances, they came to an agreement. After they defeated the hybrid demons, they would fight among themselves. At this moment, Han Dong and Bop almost didn't have time to think as they instantly chose their members. Asterisk boom. Asterisk their stomachs trembled. Both teams sent out their strongest members. Hope asked for his opinion with an honest face. Hyde, should we cooperate to deal with them first? Hyde didn't reply verbally, only nodding. On a certain level, there was a conflict between him and Hope, or it could be said that it was a one-sided conflict between him and Hope. Hope didn't mind it, and he didn't act high and mighty just because he had a higher ranking. Instead, he tried his best to get closer to Hyde. He even hoped to use this opportunity to establish a friendly relationship with Hyde. After all, behind Hyde was a great existence that ruled the universe. Chapter 1589. The hybrid demons that lived in different galaxies all over the world of S-01 actually had a circle. Hybrid demon technology had achieved barrier-free connections between galaxies as early as 2 ancient times, including the transmission of signals without delay, space teleportation stations based on neutral cities, as well as the internal transmission networks under the forces of the Old Kings. It could easily achieve barrier-free communication across the entire universe. Hybrid demons that lived in different galaxies and belonged to different Old Kings could also easily achieve online communication and offline meeting. As long as it was a slightly famous hybrid demon, the relevant information could be found on the information network. Most hybrid demons would embark on their own interstellar adventures when they reached maturity, heading to neutral cities in different galaxies to seek opportunities. Except for a few lone wolves, they would seek companions that were similar to their own strength, personality, and attributes before the adventure. This was also the opportunity for Hyde Darius and Bop to meet. It was before the game of the original essence. Bop, who had just reached maturity, left the void area for the first time with Teacher Yu's permission and came into contact with the colorful outside world. Because he was forbidden to reveal his identity at that time, the simple Bop was even deceived many times and was threatened by the atavistic body. But anyone who provoked Bop would eventually be killed. Even if the forces behind him tried to retaliate, they would be interfered with by an irresistible force of the void. In a chance adventure, Bop met Hyde, who came from the deep sea and was known as the most talented, favored one in 100 years. Hyde could tell at a glance that Bop was different from the rest and took the initiative to team up with him. He shared some knowledge of hybrid demon sociology with Bop, who was still relatively naive at that time. In return, Bop had to taste Hyde's cooking. It was also because of this that Bop became the only person who could accept Hyde's cooking. The bond was formed. The cooperation between the two could be said to be invincible. In less than a year, he had made a name for himself in the hybrid demon circle. In a year, he had perfectly explored 3 forbidden lands and was evaluated as the main candidate for the next origin. Hyde was not only proficient in the secret techniques of the deep sea, he was also recognized as the perfect deep one. He was born with a perfect Murloc body and also underwent the highest level of physical training in the deep sea. Even if the secret techniques of the deep sea were ignored, his physical body was almost invincible among his peers. At that time, the combination of Bop and Hyde was recognized as the perfect combination of number 1 wisdom and number 1 strength. The entire hybrid demon circle was looking forward to their performance in the Origin game. However, due to the single-player rules, the two of them were forced to separate in the original game. At that time, Hyde, who was still relatively arrogant, did not use the secret technique of the deep sea on the eve of the game. Relying on the deep one body that he was so proud of, he was able to eliminate many participants who had outstanding battle records in the hybrid demon circle. However, when Hyde went deep into the planet's core, he happened to meet a low-grade ancient giant. Furthermore, he could not find any information about this person in Hyde's brain. This person did not leave any information behind in the alien demon circle, nor did he have any records of his adventures or battle achievements. He seemed to have been invited to participate in the original game. At that time, the confident Hyde, with his perfect deep one body, found this giant goo-goo. He was stunned. The two of them held each other's hands and engaged in the simplest and purest contest of strength. For the first time, Hyde felt this suppression of power coming from someone of the same rank. The stalemate did not even last long. The complete suppression forced Hyde to use the secret technique of the deep sea to break free. Strength was not on the same level at all. Because the other party felt the threat of the deep sea, he took the initiative to leave after considering the time. At this moment, Hyde's confidence in his body, as well as a series of ideas, were all shattered. He was even unable to accept what had just happened for a long time. His conceit completely disappeared at this moment. When the original game ended, Hyde stared at the ancient giant, who was one rank higher than him in the rankings. He took the initiative to propose to leave Pope to stop his interstellar journey and return to the sea alone. He would start cultivating from the beginning, especially the cultivation of the body. He secretly swore that in the future, he would surpass this young man in terms of strength and become the strongest person in the same rank. Time returned to the present. Stomach Palace, before the second match began. Hyde had already made a request to Pope, hoping to use this opportunity in the game to let him fight with Hope alone. Pope wanted to say something, but in the end, he only looked at Hyde for a few seconds and agreed to his request. Match begins, because he had seen the strength of the hybrid demons in the first match. The moment the white liquid seeped into the ground, Norn from Olympus did not hold back at all and directly used his full strength. God's descent. Minotaur, his body was still growing, and his perfect muscles had reached the extreme. There was even a golden light flowing on the surface of his muscles. Boom! Heavy bull hooves heavily stepped on the ground. Two golden bull horns protruded from his forehead in a perfect arc. A huge nose ring hung in front of his face. The golden fighting aura that wrapped around Norn's body turned into a virtual image of the Minotaur at this moment, perfectly fitting with his body. In addition to the changes in his body, there was also an extremely important characteristic. The scene change brought about by God's descent was just like how Demi's changed the scene to hunting jungle in the previous match. However, scene change was not directly expressed, and it did not directly form the so-called maze. There was only a mark of a Tauren in the middle of the field. Han Dong and Pope, who were watching the match, also captured a strange sense of space at the same time. Pope's understanding was deeper. He muttered softly, "Single space affinity? A combination of pure power and space. What a rare individual." Just as God's descent was completed, Norn, who was like a bull, locked on a Hope and charged head-on, continuing the battle that had not been completed in the maze. As for Lu Ji, who was emitting an evil aura, he had no intention of engaging in close combat. He slowly lowered his two arms covered in snake scales and placed his palms on the ground. A summoning array was immediately formed. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Tens of thousands of poisonous snakes surged out like a tide, almost occupying the entire field, attacking the two hybrid demons at the same time. Moreover, Lu Ji still had some small tricks hidden in his summoning technique. Among the tens of thousands of poisonous snakes, there were two magic snakes from his body. Once they could bite the target, they could apply a very fatal curse seal. They thought that Hyde would use the secret technique of the deep sea to repel the snakes. Who knew? Hyde just stood there, and there was no sign of the deep sea appearing on his body. He allowed himself and Hope, who was not far away, to be completely swallowed by the snake tide. Why didn't Hyde use the secret technique of the deep sea? Han Dong had seen the exaggerated scene of Hyde using the secret technique of the deep sea as the favored one in London. He was somewhat puzzled by the situation in front of him. At this time, Sally on the side whispered, Hyde and Hope have a certain conflict because of their physical bodies. Maybe he wants to compete with Hope here. There's such a thing? Is his obsession so deep? However, this snake man of Takamagara has a special method to destroy the body. If he gets hit at the beginning, I'm afraid he will fall into a difficult situation step by step. Chapter 1590. In an instant, the snake tide that occupied the arena completely covered the two hybrid demons. LVG, however, was astonished. Although the summoned snakes were of the lowest level, their teeth were as hard as steel. Despite being completely covered, they were unable to bite through the skin of any of the hybrid demons. Of course, LVG had never thought that the snakes of the lowest level would be able to injure the two hybrid demons. His true trump card was hidden in the snake tide. The two devil snakes that originated from his main body were already close to Hyde's position. Since the Greek bull has already chosen the hybrid demon that looks like a barbarian, I'll deal with this guy that reeks of fish. No matter how strong his body is, he won't be able to block the devil snake's teeth. In an instant, LVG's consciousness seemed to be strung together with the two devil snakes. Spell, devil, snake demonstration. LVG's two boneless arms began to sway up and down. This meant that he was personally controlling the devil snake, achieving complete unity on the level of his consciousness. The devil snake was equivalent to his own arms. Under the control, the devil snake's speed, accuracy, and damage would all increase by 3 times. One of the devil snakes reached Hyde's neck. The other one quietly stuck to his abdomen. Seeing that his target was defenseless, LVG was incomparably excited. He wouldn't waste such a great opportunity. Asterisk whoosh. Asterisk a pair of snake fangs that emitted the luster of a seal was revealed. He bit down with all his might. Asterisk hiss. Asterisk blood splattered all over the arena. Aoki Jinsuk directly he sat up from the spectator stand, his eyes wide open in confusion. Inside the arena, LVG froze in place, his face full of shock. The one who spurted out blood wasn't Hyde, but himself. The fingers at the end of his arms were completely severed, and the web between his thumb and forefinger was completely torn. This injury was caused by the side effects of the devil snake demonstration. When the arm was completely synchronized with the devil snake, it could greatly increase the overall attributes. However, if the devil snake was injured, the arm would also suffer a similar injury. Fish scales. Scales with perfect magic resistance. However, as long as the skin is bitten, the seal will be left behind. If this happened a few more times, you'll definitely die. Under the snake tide, Hyde was still standing, motionless. Although the demonic snake's teeth had successfully pierced through the skin, they were blocked by the fish scales hidden under the skin. As the most perfect, deep one, Hyde's scales were the part of his body that he was most proud of. His strong muscles could resist physical damage, while his fish scales provided magic immunity. The demonic snake's full-force bite had broken its fangs. It corresponded to Lu Ji's broken finger. However, Hyde was not unscathed. As his skin was bitten, a snake head mark that could not be removed slowly appeared around his neck and waist. A curse mark? When the snake tried to make the next bite, Hyde curled his body into a ball and compressed all of his muscles at the same time. In the instant that the devil snake closed in, his body was like a compressed spring, instantly releasing. Boom! A shock wave formed by pure flesh spread out in a circular shape. Including the magic snake, all the venomous snakes within a 5-meter radius of Hyde were blown to pieces. Of course, LVG had already canceled the drill in advance, so he did not receive any damage. Whoosh! Hyde took a deep breath. All of his muscles, fish scales, and the fins distributed on his arms, calves, and back pulsated rhythmically with his breathing. Such a Murloc body was almost perfect without any flaws. Moreover, Hyde also used the team's resources to exchange for a highly compatible A+ bloodline, King of the Deep Sea. Aristo at the Ladybug store. Muscle burst. The air around his calves exploded as he sprinted towards LVG at full speed. The air wave formed by the sprint blew away all of the venomous snakes along the way, and even formed a clear, visible sound barrier in front of him. The explosive sprint allowed Hyde to close the distance in an instant. His strong and powerful arm swung horizontally. LVG's mobility was not bad at all. Almost at the first moment of the swing, he jumped back and dodged. Soft and slender, he was already out of Hyde's attack range. Who knew? A few toothed fish bones with a metallic luster quickly spread under the skin and quickly grew from Hyde's fingertips. Lineman Bonesmith's special claw embedded. This equipment came from a special event. It was tailor-made by an NPC that Hyde rescued, and Hyde himself liked it very much. Whoosh! LVG's body was directly torn into two. His upper body was thrown into the air. His lower body knelt on the ground weakly. However, even if he was cut in half, LVG's vitality did not show any signs of weakening. His lower body suddenly trembled and turned into two strong and flexible pythons, tightly entangling Hyde's body. The upper body that was thrown into the air was revealing an evil smile. Demon Abyss Curse. Hand of 10,000 snakes. The right arm under the sleeve suddenly turned into a different demon snake, with a snake crest similar to a dragon's horn. Hyde was temporarily restricted and could only fight head-on. When he tried to wave his claws to tear this demon snake, whoosh! A series of ring phantoms flashed in front of his eyes, perfectly avoiding the attack of the claws, wrapped around Hyde's arm, and bit his neck. Ding! This time, the snake's teeth were not broken, and purple smoke kept rising from the place where it bit the neck, showing signs of breaking through the fish scales. At the same time, a third mark formed on Hyde's body. How annoying! Hyde once again triggered the internal explosion of his muscles, and the python wrapped around his body was shattered by his muscles. Ha! He immediately grabbed the demon snake that was LVG's right arm and pulled hard. The moment he pulled his opponent in front of him. Horizontal punch. Bang! A bloody mist exploded in the field along with his silhouette. LVG was directly smashed into pieces by this punch, and his flesh scattered everywhere. The audience was also shocked by Hyde's strength, and even Bop recalled the scene when the two of them first worked together. However, an existence like LVG could not be defeated by pure strength alone. The scattered flesh turned into small snakes and quickly gathered together, and only consumed a part of his vitality to perfectly condense back to his original appearance. This was also one of LVG's major characteristics. You only know how to use brute force. Can't kill me. Moreover, no matter how perfect your body is, when the curse is complete, you will die without a doubt. Indeed, the curse on Hyde's body had always been there, and it seemed that after accumulating a certain amount, he would directly die. Since this was the case, Hyde was unexpectedly stubborn, and there were still no deep-sea patterns on his body, and he still intended to continue to suppress his opponent with his body. In Hyde's eyes, as long as he could reduce his opponent's vitality, it meant that sooner or later he would completely kill his opponent. At this moment, a huge mass of flesh flew horizontally at an extremely exaggerated speed. Hyde and LVG were so frightened that they instinctively took a step back. Boom! Dust flew everywhere, and the entire stomach palace trembled violently. Both of them looked at the side of the field in surprise. The Minotaur Norn, who was in the state of God's descent, had his 4-meter-tall, strong body completely sunk into the wall. One of his horns was completely bent out of shape. On the other side of the Stomach Palace Stadium, The simple and honest Hope covered his abdomen with one hand and scratched his head with the other, and said embarrassedly, "Sorry, I didn't intend to disturb you. Just now, that Minotaur suddenly switched places and I couldn't find a good angle for a moment, so I threw him out." What kind of terrifying power was this? One had to know that this was a game, and the level was suppressed in all aspects. Hope could actually grab a Minotaur that weighed tons and throw him in such an exaggerated manner. What kind of power is this? Hyde tilted his head and looked at Hope with an incredulous expression. The latter immediately gave him a meaningful look. At the same time, all the muscles in his body began to pulse rhythmically, conveying some kind of message, a message that only physical cultivators could understand. "Mr. Hyde, the reason why I can be ranked as a primordial spirit with you is because I have a special body, but that's all. Other than my body, I can't take out anything else. But you're different. I've always envied you and the others. I've always envied you for being able to learn and use powerful, strange, and amazing secret techniques. I hope that Mr. Hyde can bring out your true strength and let these guys from the other world have a good look." Hyde, who understood the language of muscles, was stunned. After a burst of self-deprecation, the fish scales hidden under his skin appeared, and, at the same time, they reflected the secret technique patterns of the deep sea. For a moment, the stomach palace became moist. Chapter 1591. What kind of monster is this? To be able to suppress Norn in the state of God's descent. This is the bull of Olympus. Arena. The battle between Hyde and LVG was exciting, but most of the attention was focused on Hope and Norn. The change in the scene caused by God's descent was an invisible spatial influence called Minotaur's Maze. The scene did not seem to change at all. In fact, Norn had become one with the arena, and he could change his position at will while moving. At the beginning of the battle, Hope could not figure out where the bull was going to attack. But after some careful thinking, Hope suddenly figured it out. He no longer actively looked for the bull's position, and he no longer dodged the impact that could come from any direction. He directly took the bull's impact with his body. The bull's horn, covered in golden combat energy, broke through Hope's muscle defense and pierced through his abdomen. However, Hope was not knocked away, and he did not change his position because of the pain. Instead, he stood steadily. He grabbed the bull's horn that pierced his body. Immediately, a terrifying force that exceeded Norn's expectations was transmitted to the bull's horn. What happened next scared the Greek team so much that they all stood up. The Minotaur, Norn in the state of God's descent, was pulled up. Hope only used the bull's horn as a fulcrum to lift the body of several tons off the ground. The two sturdiest horns were also severely bent in the process. He was thrown to the side wall at an exaggerated speed, causing the entire stomach to tremble violently. Is he going to forfeit? While Glass was completely shocked, he began to worry if Norn would end up in the same situation as his sister, gradually being contaminated by the hybrid demon while his body was injured. Wait, give him some more time. This kind of hybrid demon that focuses on strength should be fine in terms of contamination. It seems that he has not been contaminated yet. Decius stopped the thought of forfeiting. He still wanted to watch the competition and deepen his understanding of the hybrid demons. At least Norn had not been infected yet. Even if Norn could not win, at least he could get some information. Decius had to admit that this mantis demon named Hope had already surpassed his understanding of power. Even Hercules, who was known as the god of strength in Olympus, could not compare to him in terms of growth in strength. At this moment, a strange, moist feeling started to spread in the stomach area. Salty water droplets condensed on the surface of their bodies, and an ominous feeling formed in their bodies. Bo and Decius immediately turned their attention to the other mantis demon with fish scales. He's the guy who threw water bombs at us at the entrance. Previously, you were only relying on your basic physical body to fight. Are you going to show your true abilities now? Decius clearly remembered the power of the water bomb. Not only did it contain the impact of power, but it also contained a kind of deep-sea pressure that was even more deadly to him. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, before Lu Ji could even react, his body was torn apart once again. Moreover, the wound was mixed with a kind of deep-sea energy that was completely different from before. In less than a few seconds, corals, conches, and even fish bones grew out of the wound. LVG's eyes widened as he stared at Hyde, who was covered in fish scales and was stepping on a puddle of shallow water. Only then did he realize that the other party had been training his body all this while. Now, he was going to show his true abilities. Molting, a brand new body covered in mucus drilled out of Lu Ji's mouth, abandoning the original body that had been contaminated by the deep sea. This method also caused him to lose one life. LVG inherited the famous Yamada no Orochi from Takamagara. In addition to being proficient in the related Snake Abyss curse, he also had the characteristic of eight-headed body. This characteristic would give him 8 lives, which could be used for perfect resurrection at the moment of life and death. However, this characteristic was suppressed in the game. It only allowed him to perform molting like the one in front of him. When a main body was seriously injured, it could molt and abandon the skin and derive a new body to continue fighting. True snake form. LVG no longer held back. He directly derived the true form of his body. In the real world, he could show the form of a true snake that was thousands of meters long. Even in the game, the true snake that LVG transformed into took up almost half of the arena. Due to the consumption of molting just now, there were only 7 heads left, just as the snake heads locked on a Hyde and were about to bite and breathe. A strong figure descended from the sky and directly rode on one of the snake heads. It was Hop, who was shirtless and had a bellicose look on his face. Whoosh! Without giving the other party a chance to react, he forcibly pulled out a snake head with brute force. At the same time, he landed beside Hyde. At this moment, both of them were strength-type origins. They were actually back-to-back, fighting for the first time in a 2-person battle. The aura emitted from their muscles fused together and reached an unprecedented height. At this moment, Tower Norn, who had just broken free from the wall and was still a little dazed, suddenly felt a sense of danger coming from the front. When he instinctively wanted to block, he found that it wasn't Hop who attacked him, but a ball of water that was thrown over. Bang! The water mist exploded. The powerful impact blasted him into the wall again, and the impact of the water bullet also blasted a wound on his right arm that he used to block. The wound was immediately occupied by deep-sea creatures and slowly eroded his body. For a moment, Norn even had auditory hallucinations. A call from the deep sea. It made him have a strong desire to go to the nearest coastline and the deep sea. The balance tilted. As the knot in Hyde's heart was untied, he revealed the full strength of a deep one. His strength originally didn't lie in physical strength. Instead, as a perfect deep one, he had a strong physical body and was proficient in all deep-sea secret techniques, even reaching the level of a great existence. Combining the two perfectly, this was Hyde Darius' true strength. At this moment, he and Hop were back-to-back. There was no need for any words or eye contact. They could read each other's thoughts through the changes in their muscles. The cooperation between the two was flawless and perfect. Even Bop was completely attracted by the beauty of the muscles and couldn't take his eyes off them. One by one, the giant snake heads were pulled out or chopped off. When there was only one head left, forfeit. Under the protection of the referee, LV Jitsai kept his life. As for Tower Norn, he had already lost all his fighting spirit and forfeited at the same time. Mr. M helped him remove the remaining deep-sea pollution in his wounds. The pollution only stayed on the body and was completely different from the corrosion that Demi suffered. It could be completely recovered with a little rest. Of course, Norn, who had returned to the observation deck, didn't say a word. This match was too big a blow to him and would become an important turning point in his life. At this moment, only Hop and Hyde were left in the arena. Just as they thought that a great battle was about to begin, Hyde walked up to Hop with a relaxed expression. He slowly stretched out his hands covered in fish scales. I still remember the first time I met you in the original game. That was the first time I couldn't defeat a hybrid demon of the same level in terms of strength. Because of this, I even sealed myself in the deep sea for a long time. I studied all knowledge related to the body and searched for every powerful deep sea expert who had some attainments in the body level. It wasn't until just now that I completely thought it through. I am a deep one, a descendant of the great existence of the deep sea. No matter how strong my body is, I am inseparable from the deep sea. Let's compete in the same way again. But this time, I will use the deep sea secret technique to strengthen my body. Hop, you have to be careful. Okay, that's for the best. I don't want to fight with Mr. Hyde. For a moment, the scene returned to the original game from several years ago. The two clasped their hands together and competed in the purest of strength. Waves of the ocean spread under Hyde's feet. Deep sea patterns covered his entire body, engraving the secret technique on the surface of his body. There was even seawater flowing out between the fish scales. Boom, boom, boom. The ground they were standing on was slowly sinking. Every time they exerted force, the shock waves could be seen. Until, crack, there was a bang. The fish scales covering Hyde's knees were all broken. His knees, which had reached their limit, were forced to bend, and his body sank. Victory was decided. Winner, Suicide Squad, Hop. Chapter 1592. The result was the same as a few years ago. However, Hyde felt a sense of relief that he had never felt before. His obsession with the physical body had faded with the end of the match. At the same time, he acknowledged Hopper's extraordinary body in his heart. Even though Hyde had been traveling in the deep sea of the various star fields in the universe over the years, searching for and learning ways to cultivate the physical body. Even though in the battle just now, in addition to using his physical body to the extreme, he also used the secret technique of the deep sea to assist his physical body. However, perfection could not defeat infinity. The moment he came into contact with Hopper, it was like fighting against an endless mountain of muscles. Every minute and every second, this mountain of flesh was growing. If Hyde's strength growth rate in the game was S, then Hopper's strength growth rate was infinity. In the early stages of the game, Hyde might be able to fight, but as time passed, the gap in strength level would become bigger and bigger. However, Hyde was convinced of his loss. Through the series of muscle exchanges and face-to-face muscle collisions during the battle just now, Hyde had read all of Hopper's experiences as the seventh origin substance from his muscles over the years. This origin substance with no background, even without abundant resources and power support, used every opportunity to train his physical body. His experience was not inferior to Hyde's at all. Hopper, you will definitely win the physical body throne in the future. I look forward to that day. Even an ultimate ancestral god doesn't have a body as pure as yours. Also, if you want to talk about muscles, you can come to the deep sea to find me at any time. Okay, I'll definitely come. A kind of friendship that came from the muscles was built between the two of them. The significance of this match was far beyond the superficial victory or defeat. When Hyde returned to the team, Bob just reached out and patted him heavily on the back a few times without saying anything. He did not care about the outcome of the match. Perhaps he knew from the beginning that Hopper would be the winner, but the one who benefited the most was Hyde. When Hopper returned to the team, he was in a state of excitement. It was the first time he had such pure muscle communication. The perfect coordination and communication between muscles was like the reunion of an old friend who had been separated for many years. Handong commented, "Hopper, isn't your body a little too exaggerated? I originally thought that the Torrens God's descent would be on par with yours, but who would have thought that they were not even on the same level?" Hearing Handong's praise, Hopper answered honestly, "That's right. The Ladybug game basically reset my physical body. However, the growth of my physical body should be much higher than that of others." When I encountered that team in the labyrinth, the tower and I weren't that far apart. However, after I ate the skin and flesh of the 100-meter-tall giant, my physical body once again reached a new level. As long as the cow remains in its original form, it will be impossible for him to fight against me. At this time, Green also tilted his head and said excitedly, "Hopper, you're too experienced. Do you want to spar with me? With your current physical body, you might be immune to my abyssal corrosion and completely suppress my physical body." Hope didn't know how to answer. Whether he agreed or not, it wouldn't be good. At this time, Han Dong deliberately tilted his head to block their vision. "Glenn, let Hopper rest for a while. Besides, you still have a competition later." "Oh, that's true." Green gladly accepted Han Dong's suggestion and continued to rest on the meat cushion. Hopper silently watched all of this. He was no longer as envious as before and could understand the subtle relationship between them. This relationship was similar to the muscle friendship he had just established with Hyde. It was a kind of common attraction. There was also a kind of commonality between Han Dong and Green, and it was a unique commonality that could perfectly complement each other and change each other. It was more intimate than muscle. "Thank you." When Hopper sent a private message to express his gratitude, Han Dong quietly made an okay gesture. The selection of the members for the third round had already begun. On my OG team, after seeing the first 2 rounds, they didn't look too good. However, Shinsuke's eyes were particularly determined, as if he still had the confidence to win. Moreover, with the personal insurance set by the competition, as long as they forfeited in time, there wouldn't be any casualties. "Jinyu, you're up for the third round. You should have your own ideas and strategies. I only ask that you try your best to capture the characteristics of the hybrid demons. If I sense any danger in the stands, I'll help you forfeit in advance." After Jinyu firmly nodded, she lightly landed in the arena. Greek team. Due to Norn's crushing defeat, the team's morale was greatly affected. Even Glass had the thought of forfeiting because of this. After all, he didn't like to fight. Compared to the final treasure, he was more worried about the safety of his teammates. From the current situation, the rumors were true. The hybrid demons living in S01 had the strength to fight against the Black Tower. Every hybrid demon couldn't be defined by normal standards. Just as Glass was about to suggest that the team forfeit, Feynman, who had an old body but a very young appearance, floated down from the stands. "Leave this round to me. The person sent by Takuma Jihara has a compatibility with me, so I might have a chance. Even if I can't win, I'll help you get information about the hybrid demons. We still have a chance." When Feynman said this, he looked at Bo with a meaningful gaze. "Feynman, you must be careful. Star team." Everyone was observing the situation in the arena. Whether it was Jinyu, who had a female body, or Feynman, who had a haggard body, their strength seemed to be relatively average. In the face of this kind of easy competition, Aslan, who narrowed his eyes, took the initiative to suggest, "Why don't you let me fight this round?" However, Pope was different. He was very cautious about the third round, so much so that the frequency of his brain thinking was several times faster than before. He didn't immediately respond to Aslan. After continuing to think for 2 minutes, Pope came to a special conclusion. "This round is very important. I'll fight." "Huh?" Aslan didn't react. A burst of void luster lit up in the stands, and Pope directly appeared in the arena. Such a special way of entering made Jinyu and Feynman reveal a surprised expression. This was the first time they met a space ability user in the game. Moreover, Bob's starry eyes seemed to correspond to a real universe, vast and mysterious. They didn't expect that a hybrid demon captain would personally participate in the third round. Aslan, who was in the stands, was slightly dissatisfied, but he still believed in Pope's judgment. "Why do you have to personally participate?" "Captain, the other 2 aren't worthy of your identity." Just as Aslan threw out a question, a young man, who had a figure similar to Pope, wearing a steel mask and carrying a chainsaw on his back, landed in the arena. His eyes that flickered with the void luster looked directly at Pope, and then he got ready for battle. Han Dong battle. The two captains went up to the third round at the same time. In the stands, Aslan snapped her fingers and shot out some ice flames. She revealed an expression as if she had suddenly seen the light. "Oh, I see. Then it's fine." Chapter 1593. To be qualified for the position of captain in a hybrid demon team. He definitely possessed extraordinary intelligence, and his strength was definitely one of the best. The moment Bop entered the field, the two people on the field were shocked by the void technique. They regarded him as the most dangerous hybrid demon. Spectator Area Handong's face was full of helplessness. He had a feeling that he had been completely predicted by the opponent. As expected of the youngest Misty University professor, the son of the void, has he already predicted to this extent? Green reached out and put his hand on Han Dong's shoulder, whispering, "Nicholas, do you want me? Although Bop is troublesome, I still have the confidence to suppress and win." Han Dong hurriedly shook his head and rejected. "No, Green, you have to stay behind. I plan to go against Bop from the beginning. It's just that it's not appropriate for me and him to appear in the third round. If the Takamagura Shinsuke entered the field and Grease Glass entered the field, things would be much simpler. It's a pity that our personnel selection was last. I didn't expect that such a selection advantage would actually become a disadvantage." Green understood Han Dong's meaning and didn't comment on it. "Go, I have faith in you. But Bop is indeed difficult to deal with. Back in the original game, I had to pay a heavy price to barely defeat him. I believe that this match will be very exciting." Yeah, Han Dong had already made up his mind. He had to personally eliminate Bop during the match. Otherwise, once he got close to the finals, things would become quite troublesome. It could be said that the biggest obstacle to obtaining the final treasure was Bop. Han Dong was very confident in the control of the whole game and the overall situation. The only thing he didn't have much confidence in was facing Bop. But if Han Dong could defeat Bop here, the list of names in the finals was himself, Green, and Hop. Even if Eugene was powerful because of the demonic book, it was impossible for him to defeat Bop. In the end, the treasure would undoubtedly belong to Han Dong. In other words, the outcome of the third round could basically determine the ownership of the final treasure. The people who realized this all focused their attention on the field. Eugenius even spat out the eyeball in his body and embedded it into the railing of the spectator stand, ensuring that he would not miss any exciting scenes. In the arena, the instant Han Dong and Bop looked at each other, they immediately felt as if planets were about to collide. Speaking of the contradiction between the two, it was certainly not as direct as the one between Bop and Grimm, but the indirect contradiction had always existed. Regardless of the intimate relationship between Han Dong and Grimm, as well as the crazy compatibility. Or perhaps Han Dong had become the biggest contributor in the London game by suppressing all the originals, including Bop. Or he was favored by the vice headmaster of the University of Michigan. There was always a conflict between the vice headmaster and the vice headmaster. At the same time, he used his unique teaching method to quickly rise through the ranks and become the best lecturer of the year. To a certain extent, he was a threat to Bop, who was the youngest professor in the University of Michigan. Or perhaps the issue of who Demps belonged to. Indirect conflicts like this have been accumulating all the time. On the other side, as the referee, Mr. M also saw that Bop was unusual. The void migration performed by Bop just now reminded him of a supreme existence that existed in the S01 world. Even the higher-ups of the Black Tower listed this existence as the most uncontrollable factor. Is this young man a close blood relative of the Void Dominator, a direct descendant? If so, it would be interesting. If you can win, Nicholas, your value will greatly increase, and I can even lead you to the Supreme Will in advance. Mr. M's body slowly floated into the air, indicating that the game was about to begin. The two continued to look at each other, and they even completely ignored the other two contestants. Even when the white liquid that permeated the arena was about to recede, the two still had no intention of moving their eyes away. Such a situation made Feynman from Greece a little unhappy. Although he was very clear that the possibility of winning was slim, being completely ignored like this affected his self-esteem to a certain extent. Therefore, he took the initiative to contact the forbidden words of Takamagara. Hello. Let me first introduce myself. I am Feynman from Olympus. My divine connection is the underworld judge, Radamandes, and I am mainly responsible for the judgment of speech. Therefore, in terms of compatibility, I am very compatible with you. At first, I didn't intend to make the suggestion, but now that 2 captains from S01 are participating, and they don't care about us at all, I hope that Miss can accept my suggestion. If we can cooperate perfectly with you, we might be able to defeat them. The details are as follows. Actually, Feynman wasn't sure whether or not the other party would accept. After all, the suggestion involved a deep cooperation, and usually only teammates could eliminate concerns. What was unexpected was, when the forbidden words finished listening to the explanation, it unexpectedly nodded and accepted. For a moment, strands of death energy from Feynman slowly wrapped around the forbidden words. Its withered body also floated towards the forbidden words, as if it was about to collide with it. When Shinushi discovered this, he originally wanted to stop it. However, he still gritted his teeth. Considering that the forbidden words was about to face a captain-level hybrid demon, this might be the only way. Otherwise, it was very likely that they would be directly eliminated and they might not even be able to obtain any information. Of course, when Feynman approached the forbidden words, Shinushi was quite unhappy. At this moment, the white liquid that filled the entire field seeped into the ground. Begin. Han Dong and Bop, who were still looking at each other, simultaneously felt a sense of danger. They immediately stopped the secret conversation between their consciousnesses and looked at the abnormal situation that was happening in the field. Some stars flashed in Bop's eyes, and he was slightly surprised. Han Dong, on the other hand, had an extremely exaggerated smile under his mask. HM, what a pleasant surprise. Judging from the previous encounter, Miss Forbidden Words isn't good at fighting alone. However, once her ability is used to assist others, it can often be twice as effective or even more. Just like now, she can perfectly realize her ability. This young man from Greece is releasing a death energy similar to Captain Alex's, but it's fundamentally different. I didn't expect him to be able to do it to this extent. Unbelievable. God's descent, Radamandes, underworld judge, in front of him. Not only was the death energy wrapped around Miss Forbidden Words' body, Feynman was turning his body into a gaseous state and slowly sucking it in through Forbidden Words' mouth that was sealed with talismans. The two were currently fusing with each other with a high degree of compatibility. Asterisk ding ding ding. Asterisk the iron nails hidden in her clothes continued to make ding ding sounds. When a fusion of the two was completed, Feynman appeared behind Forbidden Words in the form of a substitute. Asterisk buzz. Asterisk a circle of perfectly fused domains spread out under his feet, and the black shadow that symbolized the domain instantly spread throughout the entire field. Han Dong and Bop were affected by a life force stripping effect at the same time. Once they received damage, the HP they lost would directly double, and the regeneration effect would also be suppressed under the influence of the domain. Not only that, but there was also a sealing effect that covered their entire body, and they might be affected by the corresponding sealing effect during battle. Bop gave a very high evaluation of the fusion state in front of him. Very strong. This is the first time I've seen Brother Feynman willing to help an outsider like this, and the compatibility is actually so high. The death effect has doubled, and there might be hope. Chapter 1594. Han Dong's original plan was to place his match with Bop in the 4th or 5th round. The most ideal situation was the Battle of the Captains. According to his observations, God Aoki was using a special method to collect information from his defeated teammates the entire time. It might even be a kind of physical information that could be used on him and provide him with substantial help when he fought. Moreover, God Aoki was also very powerful. In Han Dong's eyes, compared to Captain Demi's, Bop was the true core of the Greek team. Moreover, it seemed that because of his eyes, he had received a huge gift in the labyrinth. It felt completely different from before. If the opponents in front of him were the two in front of him, they would definitely be able to exert pressure on Bop and even cause substantial damage. The Magic Eye would have a chance to capture Bop's related characteristics. Unfortunately, Bop had predicted this in advance and chose the third round, which seemed to be the easiest to fight. What was unexpected was that two travelers of fate from different worlds were actually willing to cooperate on a deeper level. Their individual level seemed weak, but after fusion, they reached an unexpected level of strength. This was the pressure that Han Dong wanted. The greater the pressure, the more information Bop would reveal, and even his weaknesses. Bop, let's work together to eliminate the unimportant guys first, and then deal with the matters between us. How about it? Sure. Due to the cover of the strange domain, Bop's eyes also changed. Before I came to the Infinite City, I had contact with Miss Forbidden Words, so I'm quite clear about her ability. Using words, she can transmit a curse that restricts the body, and it might even touch the soul. If you want to defeat the other party, you have to decipher 2 points: death and spirit speech. Their fusion state allows the two characteristics to stack and grow. I'll decipher death. Bop, you decipher the spirit speech. Sure. As soon as the conversation ended, Forbidden Words had already thrown 10 iron nails into the air. When she waved the hammer in her hand, Feynman, who was floating behind her like a stand-in, also held the hammer at the same time. A layer of pitch-black death energy wrapped around the surface of the hammer. Ding, ding, ding. Continuous knocking. Whenever the hammer came into contact with a nail, it would add a special effect called Death Judgment. Terrifying skeletal shadows appeared on the surface of each nail. Once the nail was focused on the target, it could use the effect of the domain to inject death into the target's body. It was extremely lethal. Furthermore, the flying speed of the iron nail was also twice as fast as when Forbidden Words struck it alone. Whoosh! The 10 iron nails split in half, locked onto different targets, and flew quickly. However, when the two targets were hit, two completely different situations occurred. When the nail came close to Pop, the corresponding skin immediately transformed into a starry sky-shaped void entrance. The nail pierced through the skin, completely bypassed the body, and came out from the corresponding void entrance on the back. Ding, ding, ding. They were all nailed to the outer wall, unable to cause any form of harm to Pope. Han Dong, on the other hand, almost collapsed. He also chose to stand still. Initially, he thought that there would be some kind of extreme measure. Who would have thought that he wouldn't be able to block or avoid it at all, and the iron nail pierced his body directly. The impact of the iron nail carried Han Dong's thin and weak body to the side of the field and was directly fixed on the wall. Furthermore, without exception, the iron nails all hit fatal or critical positions. The death aura that could be seen with the naked eye was rapidly flowing into Han Dong's body with the support of the domain. His body was decaying at a visible rate, and his skin was falling off like pieces. When Shun Jie saw this situation in the stands, he was both happy and confused. He had already been tricked by Han Dong once. Han Dong's injuries came too easily, which made him feel that something was wrong. He kept feeling that something was wrong. However, the iron nails that were condensed with Forbidden Words and death had indeed pierced into his body. No matter how he looked at it, there wasn't much of a problem. On the field, Forbidden Words regarded Han Dong as a dangerous person and decisively stabbed him. Ding, ding, ding. Another 10 iron nails pierced into Han Dong's body. However, one of the iron nails that was aimed at his head couldn't break through his forehead. It was as if it had hit a hard surface and bounced off. A total of 14 iron nails were inserted into Han Dong's body. The death energy transmitted was enough to cause his body to decay thousands or even tens of thousands of times faster. Some parts of his body had even completely fallen off, revealing eerie white bones. In the eyes of the alternate world team, it was a fact that Han Dong had been pierced by iron nails. If he couldn't break free, he would definitely die. However, Forbidden Words was still not at ease. Using the iron nails as support, she cast a forbidden spell, as her mouth softly chanted some kind of high-level spell buzz. The iron nails inserted into Han Dong's body began to vibrate due to the resonance. There were even boneless cursed arms that grew from the ends and wrapped around his body. The palms held Han Dong's head from all sides. This should be enough. We just have to wait for his death. The entire process took less than 10 seconds. After doing all this, Forbidden Words was also very tired. Feynman, who was possessing her body, asked curiously, "Is this young man worth spending so much energy to deal with?" In my opinion, the hybrid demons who have spatial abilities are even more dangerous. This person is quite terrifying. Our team has suffered from him before. Well, that's fine. This way, we can completely eliminate one of our worries and focus on dealing with this hybrid demon who has spatial abilities. Next, we need to fight in close combat. Pay attention to your right wrist. This is the equipment I worked hard to obtain in the early stages of the game. As long as you can get close, no matter how proficient you are in spatial abilities, you won't be able to dodge it. Okay, Forbidden Words looked down. A bracelet woven from skulls was worn on her wrist. After testing, it was actually a purple quality game equipment belonging to the Death System. Forbidden Words, who read the equipment's information, was greatly confident. She quickly stuck to Bop with a light and strange pace. Her eyes were incomparably firm. On the other side, Han Dong, who had already been defeated, it seemed that 14 iron nails had pierced through his body and death was constantly flowing into his body. But the actual situation was better than anyone imagined. Even Han Dong had to divert his attention to suppress the crazy laughter that was surging out from his excitement. He was very satisfied with the situation in front of him. It should be known that death was not unfamiliar to Han Dong at all. Not to mention, Han Dong had received the favor of the God of Crows early on and had comprehended a unique death. His left arm came from Egypt's high priest of death, Imhotep. He also had contact with the ancient Egyptian death myth by controlling Prometheus. Waves of death matter flowed into Han Dong's body. With the help of the black vortex torso, all of it flowed into the left arm. Due to the restrictions in the game, the left arm only had contact desertification. At present, with the infusion of death matter, a deeper characteristic was slowly being activated. It was even possible to awaken part of the undying arm on the surface. Han Dong seemed to be affected by death, but it was just a disguise. The zombie body controlled the body and could easily cause the skin and flesh to fall off. While he was comprehending death, his vitality was also flowing away at the same time, which was in line with Han Dong's appearance of a heavily injured state. He was basically no different from a dead person. While Han Dong was comprehending and activating his left arm, he was also secretly observing the battle on the side. He locked all of his magic eyes on Bop. "Bop, let me see your true strength." Chapter 1595. Just as the enemy was about to approach, Bop still glanced at Han Dong, who was nailed to the wall, as if he had seen through something. He immediately thought quickly. After a while, he turned his gaze back to the front. "Nicholas," he muttered Han Dong's name softly. When Forbidden Word got close, Bop, who was originally standing still, suddenly flashed 3 meters forward. Just like the teleportation skill in games, there was no interval or process at all. The 3-meter distance between Bop and Forbidden Word was now only an arm's length apart. Even Forbidden Words didn't expect this sudden, close-range attack. Before she could do anything, Bop had already placed a finger on Forbidden Word's forehead. Guide! His finger touched the spot on her forehead, and starlight bloomed. Then it turned into a miniature black hole and directly sucked the two into it, disappearing into the stomach. Bop, this guy, Han Dong, who was planning to watch the show clearly, couldn't watch anymore. As the referee, Mr. M immediately used the white liquid to create a space tunnel and rushed to the special space created by Bob to continue supervising the competition. At the same time, he also gave the Greek team and the Onmyoji team a ball of white liquid, which could be used to watch the competition in the special space and could be used to decide a forfeit at any time. Time passed by minute. Han Dong, who was nailed to the wall, had failed to watch the show, so he could only focus on depth perception and try to recover the depth characteristic of his left arm as soon as possible. In addition, the expressions of the two teams who could see the scene inside became more and more unsightly as time passed. The strength that Bop displayed was beyond their understanding. About 10 minutes later, a small dot of starry sky appeared in the competition area, slowly expanding in a circle. When it was large enough, an old and decrepit body flew out of it. It was Feynman of the Greek team. He, who should have been fused with Forbidden Word's body, flew out alone. His body was wrapped in a layer of starlight, and he heavily smashed into the wall at the side of the field. Immediately after, Bop also appeared from the space tunnel, and he was holding the immobile Forbidden Word in his hand. However, Bop's other hanging right arm was emitting black smoke, as if it had been deeply corroded by death. At this time, Bop leaned to the side and said loudly, "Nicholas, didn't you say that I'll be in charge of soul speech and you'll be in charge of death?" As soon as he finished speaking, Han Dong, who had been nailed to the wall with more than 50% of his flesh missing, suddenly opened his eyes. Whoosh! He took a deep breath and directly sucked the nail into his body, making it a part of his body. Or it could be said that he wanted to continue squeezing out the death essence contained within. Spread out his arms, Pa. The arm that bound his whole body was forcibly broken free. Han Dong, who was half skeleton and half human, didn't show any signs of inconvenience at all. He ran as fast as he could toward Feynman, who had been sent flying to the sidelines by the space bullet. Feynman couldn't understand why Han Dong was still alive. However, he instinctively opened up his domain. The domain was compressed to a range of 2 meters, forming a liquid-like space of death. Any intruder would be subjected to an extremely strong death corrosion. He tried to stop Han Dong from approaching and buy himself some time to recover. Who knew? A whisper sounded in his mind. "I'm coming in, Feynman." After saying that, a left arm wrapped in bandages easily reached into the domain, completely unaffected. It was even absorbing the death energy contained in the domain in reverse. When Feynman realized that Han Dong was the same death perceiver as him, it was already too late. Suddenly, a white beam of light enveloped Feynman. At the same time, a beam of light enveloped Forbidden Word. Mr. M announced loudly, "Feynman and Forbidden Word have forfeited. Please let the remaining 2 contestants decide the final winner." Han Dong stared at Feynman, who was slowly floating back to the observatory, and sighed. "Sigh, what a pity. If I could absorb more death essence, I might be able to deepen my understanding of death. However, this is enough for now. By the way, Bob should have used some special method to forcibly split the combined state of 2 people. This is too exaggerated." Thinking of this, Han Dong looked at Bob with a silly face. "I just spent a lot of time interpreting death. I'm really sorry, Bob. I thought that the 2 people who had completely fused would be difficult to deal with, but I didn't expect you to tear them apart directly. Is it the power of the demonic book?" Facing Han Dong's question, Bob remained silent. When unrelated people were eliminated from the competition, their temporary cooperation no longer existed. "Come on, Nicholas." Han Dong had no intention of starting the fight directly. He just leaned against the wall and polished the chainsaw in his hand. "Isn't it better to wait? Your right arm should have hurt its foundation, and it will be difficult for you to move it. The battle just now basically belongs to you. I can't take advantage of you." Seeing this, Bop immediately drank a bottle of healing potion, limb recovery potion. He then removed the part of his arm that was invaded by death and waited for the new flesh to slowly grow. In the observatory, whether it was Forbidden Word or in a state of shock, his mind was blank. Feynman recalled the experience of being pulled into the alternate space and squeezed out a slightly frightened voice from between his teeth. What kind of monster is this? Is it really on the same level as us? Another 5 minutes passed. Bob felt his arm that had been regenerated by his nerves. A white and slender arm with starlight flowing through his blood vessels had been perfectly regenerated. It's done, come on. As soon as he finished speaking, Han Dong was already close to him, and the blood-soaked chainsaw slashed down. Ding! A finger blocked the top of his head. Bob easily blocked the chainsaw with just his right index finger that had just regenerated. He even ignored the high-speed rotation of the chainsaw. The point of contact between his finger and the chainsaw seemed to be separated by a layer of starlight, ensuring that Bob would not be harmed. This bit of starlight quickly spread and covered the chainsaw. Even Han Dong, who was holding the chainsaw, was shrouded in a layer of starlight. Just as Han Dong was about to savor the strange energy, he suddenly realized something. Bob made a squeezing motion with his fist. Instantly, an unstoppable sense of spatial compression acted on Han Dong's body through the starlight that enveloped his whole body. Crackle, bones, and flesh were crushed. In the blink of an eye, Han Dong was pinched into a ball of flesh, and the structure of the chainsaw was completely embedded in it. Bob immediately made a larger arc of an arm swing. A great spatial thrust immediately acted on the ball of flesh and smashed it heavily to the side of the field. Boom! The power was comparable to Hopper's all-out throw in the previous match. The ball of flesh completely sank into the wall. Streams of blood kept flowing out. How we fight this? This scene frightened many people and made them stand up directly. Nicholas, you should at least make it look good when you lose. Even Eugenius got up and broke out in a cold sweat for Nicholas. He didn't want his old enemy to be defeated like this. They waited for less than 3 seconds. A slightly crazy voice sounded. Sure enough, conventional means can't hurt you at all. Space is not only a fast movement and life-saving ability for you, Bob, but also a terrifying means of killing. Fight seriously. I hope we can all survive in the end. Chapter 1596. Bob had already expected that Han Dong would not suffer too much damage and could speak normally. Previously, when he was compressing space, Bob wanted to go further and destroy all the internal organs and head. However, a strong repulsive force that existed in Han Dong's body made this process impossible. At the same time, Bob also felt a strong sense of crisis, which was why he threw the meatball to the side of the field. Although the body was destroyed, Han Dong's main organs and brain were wrapped in the meatball and maintained integrity. It seemed to be a huge damage, but for Han Dong, who had the physique of an S-class zombie, it was not much different from exercising his muscles and bones before the game. Kacha, the sound of bones and muscles recombining, was constantly heard. A young man, who made the audience feel slightly unfamiliar, climbed out of the hole in the broken side wall and returned to the normal human body shape. The reason why it was unfamiliar was mainly because of his white hair without melanin. And the zombie aura that was emitted from his body was very different from the Han Dong that everyone had an inherent impression of. Demps, who was in the stands, was sincerely impressed when he saw this image. Nicholas, did you understand the essence of this game from the beginning? However, even if you understood the essence, very few people dare to try it. After all, choosing a new path would be too risky. According to the setting of the Ladybug game, all players started from scratch and were provided with a new option, Bloodline. As they could quickly grow and unlock abilities in the game, most players would grow according to the main characteristics of their original body and would not make too many changes. As a result, when everyone came to Limitless City, the characters in the game were basically the miniaturized version of their real bodies. They were very similar. However, Han Dong was different. As he accidentally obtained an S-class bloodline in the early stages of the game, he directly used the G virus, which was not obvious in its original body, as the main characteristic of the game character. The fully grown posture was very different from the real body. Only a madman, like Han Dong dared to make such a decision. In an extremely important destiny event, he abandoned the original path and made a new attempt. Perhaps this was the true meaning of the day of the Ladybug game, transferring the player's consciousness completely into a newborn body. The hope was that the player could start from scratch and choose a growth path that was completely different from the original body. Through the experience in the game, the individual would obtain enlightenment, transformation, and sublimation that they had never experienced before. Nicholas, do your best. Demps clenched his fists in front of his chest. His sixth finger grew out of nervousness and intertwined with each other. Ever since he had come into contact with Pope after the end of the London game, he had gradually realized just how terrifying of a hybrid demon Pope was, not to mention just how strong Pope was. So far, the two of them had played 19 games. Demps had only won one round. White Turret Han Dong, who had reconstructed his body, also switched to the familiar G2 posture. Whether it was white hair, it covered his entire body with hard white skin. Perhaps the large eye on his right arm had become extra conspicuous. Due to the compression of space, the completely useless chainsaw had already been abandoned. The chainsaw might have a miraculous effect when facing a large number of low-level flesh-type enemies, but in front of Bob, it would only become a burden. Whoosh! He took a deep breath and stared at Pope in the middle of the field. I still need a little luck. Let me draw a big prize. The special effect of Prison's brain was activated. Squeak, 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 the back of Han Dong's head was torn open by the tentacles as if something was about to drill out from the inside. Due to a lot of restrictions in the game, advanced techniques like soul borrowing that seriously affected balance and involved plane interaction couldn't be used in the game. After all, even if the Ladybug Foundation used all the technology, it was impossible to replicate Han Dong's unique brain. The consciousness receptor could only express a part of the brain's characteristics. The current characteristics that Han Dong wanted to use were randomly summon a servant to assist in battle, a most one. Due to the random and unstable summons, it was possible to summon a restricted crowmen, blood descendants, ghouls, or deep-sea residents from the manor. It was also possible to draw Togu, Chun-Li, or Nico. When they came to the game, they would also be compressed to the level corresponding to Han Dong's, and the power they consumed would be deducted from Han Dong's main body. Moreover, there was a high probability of summoning an ordinary resident. Therefore, Han Dong had never summoned a servant to help in the previous games because his teammates were more powerful. Currently, Han Dong could only take a gamble. To defeat Pope, he needed a certain amount of luck. It's possible to summon a more powerful blood descendant or crowman elder. It's best to choose Toga. The chains might have a chance to lock Pope. Chun-Li or Nico are also possible. While silently praying, the summoning was completed. There wasn't a single living creature at the scene. There wasn't the expected appearance of Togu, who was full of nails and holding chains, nor was there Chun-Li sticking to his side. Instead, Han Dong was holding a lump of brain in his hand. A lump of gear structure inlaid with a special brain structure that was far more complex than a normal human brain. At the same time, it also had an independent life. F***, I won the prize. Doctor, hurry up and assist me. Han Dong exclaimed. He directly stuffed the swollen doctor's brain tissue into his cranial cavity. He would explain the specific situation in detail later. Pope, who wasn't far away, quietly watched all of this and didn't stop him. It seemed that Han Dong had given him enough time to repair his right arm. Is it that special Migo brain? As Han Dong stuffed the doctor's brain into his cranial cavity, a special fusion reaction immediately occurred. The doctor's brain actually separated by itself, turning into brain tentacles that wrapped around Han Dong's main brain. It carried out a kind of responsible fusion. The relevant gear structure was also completely transplanted into Han Dong's main brain. The effects it brought included a substantial increase in the brain's computing power. It provided a kind of parallel thinking mode. The doctor would also participate in combat calculations, providing more reasonable responses and countermeasures in detail. The control of the tentacles, energy, and body would be more perfect. When Han Dong opened his eyes again, he even had a new understanding of the things in front of him. His brain had already begun to formulate corresponding tactics according to the situation in front of him. But Pope, who was in the center of his field of vision, was still a mass of unknown variables. Only when he had enough information could he integrate it into his calculations. Thinking of this, Han Dong directly rushed toward Pope from the front. Since he couldn't get Pope's personal information before the match, he could only personally find out the details. Han Dong was also prepared to pay a certain price. Mummy bandages were already hanging on the skin of his left arm. Since Pope had been corroded by the death of an enemy member, it meant that death was effective. When he got close to the attack range, when he stretched out his left arm that was wrapped in death, Pope also stretched out his left arm. Once touched by Pope, he would be wrapped in starlight like before and be subjected to space compression. Han Dong was already prepared to be subjected to space compression. It would be fine as long as he could cause a certain amount of damage to the opponent before the compression. Just as the two arms were about to touch each other, Han Dong suddenly smelled a sense of danger. Dr. Swollen was responsible for transmitting the danger signal to the body without delay. He suddenly stopped and jumped back to avoid it. He took a closer look. Pope's stretched out right hand presented a special starlight state. The skin was completely transparent, and the internal blood vessels were interconnected like stars. This state didn't require the use of space compression. Instead, it could penetrate the external body, touch the internal, crush Han Dong's brain, and even carry out a soul attack. Chapter 1597. Overlore this is the second essence. Dr. Swollen, who had just arrived in the game room, didn't know much about the situation. However, the situation in front of him was extremely urgent, and he could only do his best to help. However, he couldn't ignore the fact that Pop was his opponent. Yes, this is my own choice. This battle is not only related to the most basic question of victory or defeat, but also the acquisition of the Destiny treasure. At the same time, it will also affect my future in the Black Tower and my position in the Hybrid Demon Circle. Therefore, I can't lose. The battle between Bop and I would come sooner or later. Even if it's not here, it will be in Misha, or even in an even more critical area. It might not be a bad thing to be able to do it here in advance. In this Ladybug game, Pop and I will be suppressed to the same level. Phew. After Han Dong took a deep breath, he made an important decision. Doctor, I need to ask you for a favor, and I believe that you can do it. You have already fused with my brain and can detect my physical condition and various abilities. From now on, you only need to think, collect the environment, everything about Pop and me, and use various factors as a reference to conduct a deep deduction. Set up a trap for Pop. When Han Dong made this request, Dr. Swollen's scalp was numb. Moreover, he was instinctively afraid of an existence like Pop. This is the second essence, known as the most promising disciple of the omniscient and omnipotent existence. Pop even has the ability to predict and deduce the whole situation. His brain's ability is not inferior to anyone of the same level. How can I do it? You can do it, because we are two people, and Pop is one person. I said that I will continue to pressure him at all costs to ensure that he can't conduct coherent thinking and deep deductions. Speaking of this, Han Dong directly inserted his entire middle finger into his ear, piercing the eardrum and cochlea structure, and directly touching the brain, gently touching the surface of the brain tissue. Doctor, I have always believed in you. It is also because of this that I am willing to let you take care of all the experiments. Good. I'll try. After receiving Han Dong's encouragement and whispers, the doctor made up his mind. He took out 120% of his usual mental state during research and began a comprehensive sand table deduction. He even flattened the surface of his brain and turned it into a competition field for his stomach. At the same time, he created two miniature figures that represented Han Dong and Bob and started to operate his brain at full capacity. In the arena, After Han Dong explained the relevant tasks, he turned his gaze back to the present. If one were to come into contact with Bop at a close distance, one might encounter two completely different situations, namely spatial compression and void piercing. The former leaned towards control, while the latter leaned towards damage. Let's try a long distance. Han Dong immediately ran around Bop as fast as he could. He waved his left hand, Ka. Crows that carried the aura of death were immediately born, and black sand continued to fall from their bodies. These magical life forms formed from black sand had self-awareness and could change their positions during flight, making them difficult to capture. Once they hit their target, they would disintegrate into grains of black sand and quickly invade the body. Several dozen crows followed Han Dong as he ran in circles, flying towards Bop from different angles. Feynman from a Greek team could not help but sigh. He can actually use this level of active magic in the game, and his death level is the same as mine. Isn't this person a physical type? Why is his mastery of magic also at this level? However, the situation on the field was a little strange. No matter how many crows Han Dong released, no matter how fast he ran in circles, Bop's star-like eyes were always fixed on Han Dong, and he did not care about the situation of these crows at all. It was as if the death crows could not cause him any harm at all. Suddenly, Bop seemed to have caught something. Ignoring the crows flying from all directions, Han Dong had already turned into a star in his eyes. The trajectory of his movement and even the future trajectory of his movement were clearly recorded in Bop's brain. Complete dynamic lock, he raised his right arm. A strong energy gathered at his fingertips. As the stars flickered, a beam of starlight was already shot out. The target was Han Dong's brain. When he saw this scene, even Grim, who was watching the battle, felt his heart tighten. He, who was originally lying on the meat cushion, immediately changed to a sitting posture and carefully watched the penetration of the beam of light. Whoosh! The beam of light crossed half of the field and shot into the sidewall. Emer's stomach palace was almost penetrated by the beam of light, leaving a bottomless hole on the surface of the outer wall. It could be said that Bop was best at energy emission. In the London game, he also used the void cannon to kill the mythical body that tried to escape. However, the situation on the field was abnormal. First of all, the death crows that besieged Bop. Obviously, Bop didn't seem to do anything, but the group of crows all died when they were 1 meter away from him, and the surrounding 1 meter was full of black sand. However, Bop himself was also quite confused about the situation in front of him, and even slightly tilted his head to express his puzzlement. Because the perfect ray that he cast also failed to hit the target. I clearly locked the star path, and it is impossible to have any deviation. Could it be that the trajectory has changed? Han Dong, who was not far away, had stopped running. He seemed to be expressionless, but his heart was shocked. When he just observed the starlight at Bop's fingertips, a sense of death swept through his whole body. Even the doctor who was immersed in the sand table deduction was shocked, thinking that he was about to die, when he realized that it was impossible to avoid it. The will to survive, combined with everything that he had accumulated so far, was all used to activate the magic eye. As a result, a vortex was formed in the pupil, and the black vortex effect acted on the space in front of him. As a result, the incoming starlight beam was affected by the distortion and changed its course. It almost brushed past Han Dong's temple, which was quite dangerous. I thought that close combat was dangerous enough. I didn't expect that Bop was actually good at long-range attacks. The ray just now seemed to have predicted my future trajectory and locked onto my head without any deviation. The release of the vortex, I will consume too much energy, and it can't be used many times, and it may not be able to affect the trajectory in time every time. In this way, close combat is better. I can only use my trump card in advance. What a scary guy. At this moment, both of them looked at each other with puzzled eyes. Han Dong also noticed that Bop clearly didn't take any defensive measures, and all the death crows that were close to him disintegrated. The power of the demonic book? I remember that the reward that Bop received in the London game was called Revelation of Gracie. With his learning ability, he must have gone deeper than Eugene, and he might have completely mastered the first part. It's really difficult. Han Dong shook his head helplessly and leaned towards Bop again. However, it was different this time. Once Han Dong was close enough, he could not help but sigh. The blood flowing in his right arm had already activated a certain characteristic under Count's control, turning into a sword-shaped structure. The moment he raised his arm, Shua, a holy sword forged from blood appeared from his palm. As a hybrid demon, Bop immediately felt the attribute restraint from the holy sword. He couldn't be like before, where he used his finger to catch the sword blade. Starlight overflowed, using pure energy to form the space. A cosmic light sword instantly appeared in Bop's hand. Ding! The two swords intertwined, and a tearing shockwave spread out on the field. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.